Welcome to PEP198. This is the part 2 for PEP198. If you haven't heard part 1 of PEP198, go listen to it now. It's a great episode. This is the extra bit that we've thrown together a few days later, the Planet Extra podcast. And we have lots of great stuff for you. Our keynote interview for the day is Lanhee Chen, one of my absolute favourites. We've got a lot of correspondence coming up, but we got one big topic which I just could not fit into the part 1 of PEP, and I did not want to wait until next week because it would probably take an hour to go through with Dave, and there is so much other stuff to talk about already in the next PEP. So I just want to sneak this out now. I want to just go from beginning to end on the situation with immigration.
Okay,
Lucky?
brilliant. That'll be a lot of fun.
But before we do, you have something to play us, don't you?
Yeah,
Talk us through it.
I will indeed. So we've been flooded with emails from lovely Peppers who are giving us some brand new stings for PEEP.
Thank you very much, Peppers.
Which means no more mocking up my own crummy intro with whoosh noises in the end. We can listen to something that a lovely band called Off Chops who...
Are they all called Dan?
No, they're
All our sting riders are called Dan.
I'll message them and I'll find out if Off Chops is any of their members are named Dan.
Can you ask them, if not, for them to all change their name to Dan?
They did also DM me on TikTok to let me know that there is a big problem with our merch when we could sell it, which is that the PEP logo is completely covered by a guitar strap, which will be needed to get fixed. But without further ado, let's listen to the lovely theme that they put together.
Beautiful.
It's really nice, isn't it?
See, this is great too, because I've been trying to, since Lockie is 24, I've been trying to school him in all the music that he missed, because he missed so much music before he was born.
And after, actually.
and so just the other day, I was trying to school you in post-grunge rock, like sort of late 90s rock. And that is right out of the bag.
It's really cool.
It's fantastic.
I like this sound.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And next week, or next PEEP, we will hear a sting that was put together by Dan. And we'll just sort of play them through.
So it's going to rotate them.
Maybe rotate. We'll see what we like. We'll see what the Peppers like. I'm a big fan. That was fun.
That's pretty nice. That's pretty nice. Thank you very much, Off Chops, and thank you very much for one of the many Dans for your sting as well. We cherish both of them, and that's why we're going to play both of them because we're very grateful to both of you. So thank you very much, all of you. Now we've got the sting down. Let's have some content. I want to talk to you about immigration.
Brilliant.
Let's start at the beginning. Polling. Trump's immigration policies, well, his whole platform is super popular. It is, without doubt, the most popular part of his presidency. And this, we didn't necessarily think that was going to be the case.
And then it was.
But it was. And I'll talk you through why that is in the intervening minutes. But just to give you the numbers, according to YouGov, 52% of US adults trust Trump a lot to handle immigration. Not just a little bit, a lot. The next most out of the things that, the percentages of people that trust Trump to do things was 46% trust him a lot to handle the economy. 45% trust him a lot to handle foreign policy, 43% foreign trade, so on. But 52% for immigration, streets ahead there. Pew, 59% of US adults say they approve of Trump increasing efforts to deport people who are living in the US illegally. CBS, 59% support for Trump's deportation program.
Okay.
According to Pew, 58% approve of Trump sending additional military forces to the US-Mexico border. According to CBS, 64% support sending troops to the southern border. According to Quinnipiac, 60% support sending troops to the southern border. Even 29% of Democrats said that. And 74%, according to Quinnipiac, said Trump is responsible for the right number of deportations. Now, I just want to point out those numbers in the 60s about military on the border.
Massive.
They used to be in the 20s and 30s. So
wow.
they've flown up. AP NORC poll, deporting undocumented immigrants who have been convicted of violent crime, plus 76. That's a net positive of 76.
Whoa.
Quinnipiac, plus 77, 83% to 6%.
Batting out of the park.
Yeah, and that is the reason right there why I think there's two reasons why I think his immigration agenda at the moment is quite popular. One is because he's just getting results on the border, which we'll get to in a second. The second is he's leading on the front foot when it comes to criminals. Like you look at the PR coming out of their social media, coming out of their ads. It's just all about criminals. And that is insanely popular. At least it was insanely popular. All those polls are from 2 weeks ago. I'm going to be telling you what the new polls are in a second.
You sneaky bugger.
Yes. The one downside, was still 2 weeks ago, I did give you
You know that I haven't read things. That would not have worked if Dave was here.
We are back 2 weeks ago for a little bit more before we come to the present. The one downside, that point in time for Trump, 44% approved of the administration suspending asylum applications from people seeking to live in the US. 55% disapproved of that. So Americans, even then, 2 weeks ago, they still approved of asylum seekers going through a proper process. It's always been the chaos that they object to. The chaos on the border is what they've always objected to. And that's ironic because we're going to go into a bit more detail on Biden as well. That was exactly what Biden gave them. Biden gave them Trump was acting like it's all chaos and people bit that. For the first 3 years of Biden, there was a lot of chaos. But in the last year of Biden, there wasn't much chaos at all. The numbers dropped precipitously on the border. And Biden essentially had a carrots and sticks situation where if you took the carrot, there was a process by which you could apply for asylum in a proper procedure, a legitimate way. And there was plenty of opportunity and people took it. And that was great. And that's why the numbers, I think, dropped off as much as anything. But then if you didn't take that option, then there was almost no way you could get asylum. And so that's why the numbers of unorthodox, shall we say, crosses dropped off. So Biden actually was giving them what they wanted. He was giving them lower numbers and no chaos, but by then the damage was done. I've said this a number of times. They really buggered up immigration in their first 3 years.
Sure.
What Biden did in his fourth year, I didn't like what Biden did in his fourth year. I think it was too mean. But if they'd done something not nearly as mean in his first year, it never would have gotten out of hand. And then they wouldn't have needed to do that, and it would have been much more effective. And I say it's a real lost opportunity because after Trump's first term, when he buggered up immigration completely, the door was open for Biden to show that you can control immigration while at the same time being humane and being a decent person and then being a decent leader. But he just didn't bother. He just said, well, whatever, who gives a shit? It'll be fine. And for 3 years he's let it rip basically. And then when it got out of control, then he just pulled the lever as hard as he possibly could. And by then the damage was done, which is a shame. Anyway, I've talked enough about Biden. I will mention him a little bit more in a second. But wording is very important. AP and ORC, 43% favoured deporting all immigrants living in the United States illegally, so it's 43% approved, 37% disapprove.
Mm-hmm.
But deporting all immigrants living in the United States illegally, even if that means they'll be separated from their children who are citizens, 28% approve of that to 55% disapproval. So the conditions are important.
Yeah.
That's all 2 weeks ago. Let's go to now. Washington Post had polls out this week. Trump's in a lot of trouble. Like, the numbers are dropping quite fast. Not just in Washington Post, right across the board. The last week, 2 weeks, the numbers have really started to drop off. I'm going to go into some detail in the next PEP about that, and probably a little bit on Planet America on Wednesday as well. But it's affecting immigration as well. According to the Washington Post now, 51% said they support the mass deportation of undocumented immigrants. Remember the numbers before were about 60%. Now it's 51%. When asked about deporting undocumented immigrants who aren't criminals, 39% approved to 57% who disapproved. When asked about deporting undocumented immigrants who arrived as children, only 26% approved to 70% who disapproved. We'll come back to that. When asked about deporting undocumented immigrants who have US citizen children, so who have children themselves,
Right.
30% approved, 66% disapproved. So these are all numbers we are going to revisit soon. But importantly, it's just criminals really that they're into deporting. The rest, it's already becoming quite unpopular, and my guess is it's about to become more unpopular.
So it's dropped by.
But basically across the
20?
board,
No, 10?
It's more between 10 and 20% depending on your poll.
Yeah, right.
Right across the board, everything has dropped 10 to 20%.
Right.
Now, in the case of general deportations, it used to be at 60, so now it's at 50. In terms of non-criminals, it used to be at just below 50. Now it's at 40.
Yeah.
In terms of kids and stuff, it's gone from 40 down to 30
Yeah.
and so on.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, so that's the polling situation. Now let's look at what's actually changed. Let's look at Trump's actual policies. Now they've sort of bedded in a little bit. So these new policies, first of all, first thing he did, day one, executive orders. He stopped all of Biden's carrots. Remember I just talked about Biden offered these carrots for orderly, lawful migration. None,
Ba-bow.
zero, all gone, every single one of them. So he ended the app, the CBP1 app, which allowed people to make appointments for orderly vetting on the border to apply for asylum. They used to be able to have a certain number every day. Now, no. There were 30,000 appointments that had been made that Trump just cancelled. It's the ended the. So I think it was from memory. It might be 40,000 per month.
Wow.
We're allowed to make appointments, I think.
And now it's not.
Now it's none. He ended the parole sponsorship process for Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Ukraine. For those who don't remember what the parole thing was, you could get, if you were from a dodgy country like those five, you could get a 2-year parole into America where you had to get a private sponsor. A private individual had to agree to sponsor you, and they were going to help you get work and be self-reliant, like this one-on-one sponsor.
Yeah.
The idea was the government wouldn't do anything. It would just let this private sponsor do it. And it worked really well as a process. Like, the people who volunteered to be sponsors were into this and were more than happy to help out. And
Not paid?
Not paid.
Yep.
Not paid. And the migrants would stay at their place often as well, like a border. So, like, there's a lot of Christians in particular who wanted to help out, and this gave them the opportunity. I really loved the parole sponsorship program. I thought it was brilliant. Go on. He also ended the Central American Minors Program. They allowed kids from Guatemala. Not for Guantanamo.
Later.
Yeah, we'll get there. Guatemala, Honduras.
So will the kids soon.
Yes, nice, swish. And El Salvador to reunite with parents who are already in America. So the parents are there without their kids. This will allow the kids to come. No, not anymore. Gone.
Oh.
And he also closed down the safe mobility offices in Latin America that allowed people to apply to come to America without having to come to the border. This is the best part. Having offices in Latin America.
Over there, yeah.
So no one needs to spend months like crossing Mexico to get to the border and then just knocking on the door. Just organize it in an orderly fashion. No chaos. They had the offices, they've gotten rid of the offices. So anyway, so all those carrots are now gone. That's the first thing. Second thing they've done is they've ramped up enforcement in a big way.
Less carrots, more sticks.
Yes. They've removed, for instance, the requirement that agents prioritize public safety threats. Until now, under Biden, it was, if while we're trying to arrest a criminal, we come across a non-criminal illegal immigrant, we can deport them, but we're trying to get the guys who are creating trouble. The criminals, the nuisances, the people who are a problem. There's only so many people you can deport. Let's make as many of them as possible nuisances, people who we want to get rid of. Trump gave the impression that Biden was just letting criminals let it rip. Just do whatever you want, no problems, open borders, go wild, criminals, just rape and pillage and murder as much as you want. No, they were prioritizing getting rid of criminals. But that's changed now to there being no priority, just anyone who's illegal, gone. Now, I should say that the border czar, Tom Homan, seems obsessed with getting rid of criminals. So he's certainly going out of his way to try to raid wherever they think they're going to find criminals. But they're a bit, we'll get into the numbers in a second. They're a bit looser on how many non-criminals they'll take. There's no legal priority for them to, legal reason for them to prioritise one or the other, because the executive order has said flat out, all illegal immigrants are equal priority to go.
Yeah. Which kind of stands, right? If they're all illegal immigrants, they're all criminals.
No, look, the logic is that is their logic.
Sorry, that's the internal logic. That's not logic that I subscribe to.
No, that's fine. That is their logic. Yeah. That is their logic. But I personally...
It's not helpful logic.
I personally am happier with the Biden logic because there are severe limitations on who you can deport, which we will get to. And if you're deporting some rando or some chicken farmer or some apple picker, that is a rapist who isn't being deported.
Yes. No. Yes.
It's the priority system. I thought was good. They've gotten rid of it. They're also allowing illegal immigrants arrests at sensitive locations. Under Biden, you couldn't arrest people at schools, at churches, or courthouses. Now they're all on limits.
Whoa! At schools.
At schools. Now, to be clear, it hasn't happened at schools yet.
Okay, right.
But it can. They're allowed to. They are actually, and we're going to get to this as well, they've been quite judicious in the powers they are using at this point in time. Okay. Which is intelligent.
Yes.
Because they have the powers to go nuts at the moment, and they haven't really done that. Haven't needed to, but they've reserved the right to go nuts down the track. So far, they have turned up at courthouses. They haven't turned up at schools at all. They've only turned up at churches once or twice. So they're trying to be judicious, but they have the ability to. Trump gave them that ability. According to AP NORC, people opposed to arresting undocumented immigrants in hospital by 25 points. This was 2 weeks ago. They were opposed to arrest them at church by 37 points. They were opposed to arresting them in a school by 46 points.
Wow.
That's 2 weeks ago. So it would be 10 points worse now.
Yeah.
That's also, by the way, exactly why sanctuary cities started, because illegal immigrants refused to be witnesses to crimes because they knew if they were a witness to a crime, they would have to go to court to testify and then ICE would pick them up.
Whoa.
Yeah, because their name would be on the docket as a witness. ICE would see it and they go, great, we'll go and pick you up. So therefore, illegal immigrants weren't being witnesses anymore and which was terrible for catching
the people
criminals.
who need those witnesses.
Yeah, exactly. So that was part of the logic behind sanctuary cities, which, by the way, didn't start under Trump. They started under Obama. Obama was actually, where once again we'll get to the numbers, the king of deportations. And sanctuary cities arose in response to Obama. Anyway, also expedited removal used to allow deporting people. Sorry. What it means, expedited approval, is removal is when you deport people without going to a judge.
Okay, sure.
Before you could only do that for people who are here for less than 14 days. Trump has changed that now to 2 years.
Big jump.
That's a big jump. It's a big jump. So these are all enforcement changes from Trump. Also, he's reassigned FBI, DEA, IRS agents to become de facto immigration agents. Also, he's sending military to the border. We've already talked about this, to build walls and detention facilities. That's after he declared national emergency. 1,500 military extra have also gone to the border as part of a permanent mission to do what? We're not sure. Also, the Texas National Guard has been empowered by Customs and Border Protection to make immigration-related arrests as long as a Border Patrol agent or other federal immigration officers accompany them. So they can't do it by themselves, but if they go a fed with them, like a customs guy, then they can basically act like an immigration agent. So it's that way. That's their way of multiplying the power of ICE. Because like Dave has said a number of times, ICE is actually incredibly small with not many people. So they want to multiply their power as much as possible. So he's deputised FBI, DEA, and IRS agents, and also got the Texas National Guard on board. Also, Trump has suspended asylum completely for people entering illegally at all. He suspended not just asylum, all immigration law for people entering the country illegally. That's because he declared an invasion. He said it was an invasion of these people, and so therefore he said the laws don't apply to them because it's an invasion.
Okay.
That's his logic. Now, to be clear, this actually isn't much different to Biden.
Right.
Like I said, in Biden's fourth year, he went way past where I would. I actually criticised him for going too far because I thought he kind of became a bit lawless. Biden's final position was that the same thing, suspending asylum and immigration law for people entering illegally. But there were exceptions for people who affirmatively sought out an agent to state that they feared torture. There's an exception for them. There's an exception for if arrests fell below an average of 1,500 for 28 consecutive days, which never happened under Biden. But if it did happen, then asylum law would apply again. And didn't apply for children as well. And there was a couple other minor circumstances. Trump removed all of them. So we went from Biden almost entirely banning asylum to Trump completely banning asylum. Both of them, in my view, were breaking the law, which clearly says that you're allowed to, if you're on American land, claim asylum. If you meet the conditions.
Yes.
Bottom line, it's going to take years to work through the courts. They're trying to, and by then Trump doesn't really care. This is in 3 years' time or whatever.
Yeah.
In the meantime, he's just booed a whole bunch of people. So he's happy about that. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what the law has to say in a couple of years' time. But for now, asylum is essentially illegal.
Wow.
Yeah. And how about some famous pros? Like Romania and Mexico. We've all heard about that. That's the policy where people, while they're being processed, they're kept in Mexico. If they're found to not be legitimate asylum seekers, then they stay in Mexico.
This is the one that you equated to something like the Malaysian.
Yes.
Cool.
Incorrectly.
And incorrectly, but
but that was
jogging
the one,
my memory.
Yeah, that was one I was thinking at the time was the Malaysia solution. I forgot how
isn't.
dodgy the Malaysia solution was.
Yeah.
But the theory of third-party processing is one that Australia's been kicking around for decades. And this is just third-party processing.
Yeah.
In Mexico. Well, actually, Mexico's not the party processing. America is processing with their judges, but in Mexico.
In Mexico.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So that policy's been restored. So non-Mexican migrants seeking asylum need to wait in Mexico now till the resolution of the cases. Except there's no asylum. Asylum's been banned. So remaining in Mexico is unnecessary. Even though it's on the books, no one's doing it because there's no asylum. So there we go. It's an invasion, folks. Temporary protection status, or TPS, they have rescinded. Oh, sorry, just to remind you, temporary protection status is if you're, once again, from a dodgy country.
2 years.
Especially if you're trying to escape something like an earthquake or some kind of like gang activity or something. You get 2 years in America. Yep. They can roll it over and extend that 2 years for another 2 years if they want. And in fact, they often do.
And that's what they've been doing.
That's what they've been doing for a lot of countries. They finally rescinded the extended TPS for 600,000 Venezuelans. Biden tried to extend their stay last year. They're going to have to go by September 10. They've terminated TPS completely for 348,000 Venezuelans. They have to be out by April 1.
April?
April. Yep. DHS Secretary Noam, she determined that Venezuela has seen improvements in the economy, public health and crime that allow Venezuelans to be, quote, safely returned to their home country. Sure.
Thanks.
It's very safe there.
Kristi Noem?
Kristi Noem, that's the one. Big changes happening in Venezuela, folks. Big changes. Obviously, that should still be in place, but no one really cares. It's kind of inefficient as well, getting rid of TPS, because those people have jobs. They're legal. Deportation costs $50,000 a head. It's kind of lose-lose. You're losing taxes, you're losing employment, and it's costing you money to deport them, but whatever. It's also a little weird because Venezuelan Americans, they vote Republican. I'm not sure if Trump is aware of that he's deporting a whole bunch of potential Republican voters. Like right now they don't vote because they're not citizens, but if they went through the citizenship process, that's Republican voters that you're getting rid of. This week, the Haiti TPSs were revoked as well. You might recall the whole eating cats and dogs thing.
I do.
Most people do.
Yep.
Many of those Haitians in Ohio were on TPS visas. About 520,000 immigrants are Haitians on TPS visas, many of them fleeing gang violence. Haiti's still not a great place if we're being honest, but and once again, Biden tried to extend their stay till February 2026. That's been revoked. They're going to get out of here by August this year. I expect that's going to be challenged in court because while the Secretary of Homeland Security has the right to terminate TPS designations. They can only do that after determining that the country no longer meets the requirements for the TPS designation, like they did with Venezuela. In Haiti, she hasn't said a thing. So I think they're going to challenge that in court. There's other countries with TPSs, though. El Salvador, Ukraine, Sudan. They haven't had theirs revoked yet. But there aren't so many of them as there are Venezuelans and Haitians.
I was going to ask why. Yeah.
That'll be why. I'm sure they'll get to them eventually.
Yeah.
Refugees. We've mentioned this. He suspended the refugee program indefinitely, Trump.
Yep.
That's including cancelling 10,000 vetted refugees with scheduled flights already to come and cancelling the plans of 22,000 vetted refugees approved to travel. That's heartbreaking for those who care about refugees because if we have a look at the graph right there, you can see that it took Biden 3 years to rebuild the refugee program the last time Trump buggered it up. And now he's done it again. So between 40,000 and 60,000 Afghans around the world in particular are actively seeking resettlement in the United States, and they ain't going to get it, at least the next 4 years. Many of them worked for US contractors or affiliated organisations during the war. There's only one group of refugees who have been allowed into America at this point. Do you know who they are? Literally, there's only one group of refugees. The refugee program is only open for one group of people.
Ukrainians.
White South Africans. Sounds like a joke, doesn't it?
It does sound like a joke.
But it's true. White South African farmers.
So white is specified in the...
Yeah.
That's... yeah, that is a joke.
Well, look, I mean, if I don't know what's going on in South Africa. I got to be honest.
Neither.
I'm no expert, right? I find it easy to believe that white South African farmers might be a persecuted group. Like I know
sure.
they've got expropriation laws and all this kind of shit. I don't know the ins and outs, okay? So I'm not weighing in on that.
Yes.
But I could believe that they are a persecuted group. White South African farmers. I can accept that. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. But I can't accept they're the only persecuted group in the world.
Yeah.
That's what I can't accept.
And it reads like a joke considering
It does.
that the most powerful person right now is a white South African man.
Yes, that's right. Although, importantly, I don't have the word here, unfortunately, but every time we bring this up, I have to make this point.
Oh, please.
He isn't Afrikaans.
Oh, really?
Elon Musk is not Afrikaans.
Oh,
He's-
scratch whatever I said.
He's English background, not Dutch background, and there is a difference.
Right.
Like in South Africa, you've got the Afrikaans guys and the Dutch background guys. They have their own issues. The English are not them. The apartheid guys were the Afrikaans guys.
Okay.
Cool. So there is actually a difference.
Yeah, fascinating.
But yeah, still white South African. That is true.
Yeah.
That is true. Yeah, it's almost a parody, isn't it?
It does feel a lot like a
yes.
headline.
Yeah,
That's a joke. Yeah.
Although one of the things that makes it even more of a joke is that the white South African farmers don't even want asylum. They've rejected it. Like the coalition of white South Africans, they've got their own little coalition of organisations, little interest group. They've specifically, officially stated their members are rejecting the asylum offer. Quote, we may disagree with the ANC, but we love our country.
Huh.
So there you go. So these people who the American government is saying, okay, you guys are so persecuted, we will give you refugee status. They're saying, actually, we're fine. We're cool. Don't worry. And all the other people going, we desperately need it. The Afghans who are like dying, have been tortured by the Taliban and hiding out in Pakistan desperately for their lives. No one gives a fuck about them. But the guys who don't want it can have it if they want.
I think that's kind of, again, it cements the point that the government think they're making of. Well, we gave it to the people who really needed it, and not even they wanted it. So clearly no one else needs it.
That's fair. That's exactly right.
I'm really great at
it's impeccable logic.
putting my brain into this.
You have an evil talent. Okay, then we're still talking things that the Trump administration has done. They've also no, you're right. They've also removed migrant rights. They've promised to cancel student visas and deport pro-Palestinian protesters if they're migrants. They call them Hamas sympathizers, by the way. We'll get to that. They're also forcing all non-citizens to be added to a biometric database, which sounds a little bit science fiction-y. Not happy science fiction either.
No.
Also using military planes for deportations, handcuffing all the migrants. I'm not sure why they're doing that. Like often these people aren't criminals. That's what set Colombia and Brazil off the other week, 2 weeks ago. It was the handcuffing. But Trump bullied them back in the line. Okay, what's the response to all this? Mexico has started constructing giant tent shelters in 9 border towns. They say they'll provide deported Mexicans with food, temporary housing, medical care, and assistance in obtaining identity documents, as well as the opportunity to board buses to be sent to their hometowns free of charge. Also, $100 cash cards. Thanks, Mexico. About 4% of Mexico's population is living undocumented in America right now.
Whoa.
So that could be expensive. Yes.
That is effective bullying.
Yeah, it is. The Latin American response, they're basically on their knees. They'll do whatever Trump wants. Any individual country in Central America can easily be wrecked economically by America if they want. And America knows it.
Yeah.
And Trump is a bully. So he's happy to threaten them. Like it's a full-on gun to the head stuff for Central America because like America is just such a large proportion of their aid and their trade. Like if America cuts them off, they're done.
Jeez.
you'd think that they might unify. If all of Central America and South America stood together against America, threatening basically to ally with China, which takes an active interest in the region, you think that could have an effect, but they haven't had that ability to unify at this point in time. So Trump divides them and conquers them. But also, they've got no reason to stand up to him because Trump really cares about immigration. They really don't care about immigration. Because if you're a leader in Central America or South America, you're a leader of a country where there's constantly migrants just flowing through. So the people are pretty cool with it. They just don't care.
Right, yes.
So taking some migrants back from America, who gives a shit?
Sure, okay.
Like, that's not a problem for your country. It's not a problem for your prime ministership or presidency. There are 20 million migrants sloshing around that continent already, just moving from country to country. Whereas presidential approval ratings, they don't rise and fall from immigration. They rise and fall from crime and from the economy. Now, Trump has the ability to pressure those countries in a way that ruins their economy. And if it ruins their economy, up goes crime. So Trump uniquely can get them voted out.
Wow.
And what he's asking from them doesn't bother them at all. So that's why they're basically his bitches, because it's not a bad life. Like, it's not just keeping Trump happy.
Yeah,
doesn't
keeps
hurt,
you in.
doesn't hurt them at all. So that's why he has such success bullying Latin America. So that's where we're at with all the changes. Let's now focus on the raids. Right? There's quite a few changes there, but essentially, even though I went through bit by bit, like there's a lot of changes on internal arrests. On the border, there's a lot less of a change than Democrats would like to think. Now, in the first week, the raids internally, really effective. Lots of criminals being arrested, lots of gang members, lots of rapists, lots of murderers. Remember, people really want to see criminals getting arrested. And in the first week, oh my God, they arrested so many criminals. Angry, scary people like this guy here.
I'm not going back to Haiti.
One of those threats is this illegal alien from Haiti. ICE says he's a gang member with 17 criminal convictions in recent years.
Trump, you feel me? Yo, Biden forever, bro. Thank Obama for everything that he did for me, bro.
I love that guy so much.
I do love thanks Obama, particularly in the context of you previously saying Obama was king of deportations.
Yeah. But I love that he gives positive name checks to two Democratic presidents. I mean, it can't be helped by both of them.
Did ICE give him a script?
It does read like it, doesn't it? It really does. I love just how angry it's just perfect for Fox. We've got behind, I mean, you've seen undoubtedly when I record from the office that we've got 3 TVs behind us, one with MSNBC, one with CNN, and one with Fox. And we've always got the volume off. And in the first week of Trump's new term, every time I looked up on Fox, they had that guy. They just had him on constant rotation. They loved him so much. I honestly must have seen him 100 times in that first week. They loved him so much. That was like if they were going to the casting couch to pick the perfect person, then that was their guy. Anyway. So, but that was like day 3. I think they got that guy. Everything was going great.
Yeah.
On day 3.
Yeah. And, play the clip again, guys.
Yeah. I think we got a Tom Homan clip as well from that period back then. He was loving it.
Well, I can tell you right now, Chris, is we arrested 1,300 people. Over 1,000 of them were criminals. Who are the other ones? They're either fugitives who've been through immigration court in order to remove but didn't leave and became a fugitive, or collaterals. Where did the collateral arrests happen? In sanctuary cities, because they forced us into the community. Look, I said from day one, no one's off the table. If the United States are illegally, you got a problem. But we are concentrating on public safety threats first. And it just makes sense. I don't care if a Republican, a Democrat, independent. Why not let law enforcement going to a county jail, taxpayer county
Mm-hmm.
jail, to arrest a guy that you locked in a jail cell. So obviously he's a public safety threat. That would solve a lot of this problem. I hope the sanctuary cities come around.
Okay, so that is a real microcosm of something we're about to see a lot. First of all, Tom Homan, we're about to see a lot. He's the border czar. He's the guy in charge of all these raids, right? Number one. Number two, Tom Homan's got a real problem with sanctuary cities. He doesn't like them at all. You're going to see him whinging about sanctuary cities a lot. Like pretty much every time he's on TV, he's whinging about sanctuary cities. And number three, like that situation, if that continued on, that was great. Like who would protest about 1,000 criminals being deported?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
That was just one day.
Which is why it was
1,000
popular.
criminals. Yeah, exactly.
No one was.
Yeah, so that was that was day three. That was everything's going swimmingly. They're just deporting lots of those angry dudes going fuck Trump. I love you, Obama. I love you, Joe Biden.
It is great.
Yeah, there's just a lot of those guys. 17 charges. Oh, that's the other thing. He had 17
Yeah,
charges.
yeah.
Oh my God, he's so perfect. But then the issues began. Let's talk through the issues. Number one, deportation is an issue. It's one thing to go around arresting people. They talk a lot about the arrests, not so much about deportations. There's a difference. Sometimes you would think they're the same thing. They are not the same thing. Because as I told you many times last year, deportations are hard. There is a legal process that these people need to go through. There's an immigration court they need to go through with a backlog of 3.5 million people. You might wait 9 years to go through immigration court, depending on where you are. 9 years.
9 years before that guy gets through.
Yes.
Oh,
well,
man.
I mean, we don't know. Maybe he's already
No.
been to immigration court.
Yeah.
It's
He got expedited.
yeah. He's I'm sure they'll find a place to put him. Maybe give him his own Fox show.
I was going to say Vox Pop. Like,
Let's just put him on at 8 p.m. on prime time Fox. So you can just say fuck Trump for an hour every night. So a bunch of the people Trump has arrested are going to be in the queue for years and years for immigration court. Many countries don't take them. Don't take them back. China doesn't take them back. India doesn't take them back. Well, now India might. But anyway, a lot of countries don't. There's all kinds of logistical issues. They cost a lot of money. The flights cost a lot of money. And they don't have an unlimited budget. ICE has a tiny budget. Fact is, both Obama and Biden did a lot of deporting as well. So you're going to have to work hard to out-deport those guys because those guys did plenty of deporting, as much as they could at least, even though Republicans pretended they didn't. And they still to this day pretend they didn't. The numbers are clear, which I'm about to tell you. So comparisons to Trump aren't as flattering as you think. Let's go for numbers. Obama deported about 2.9 million people during his first term and deported 1.9 million people in his second term. Trump deported 1.5 million people. Biden deported 1.5 million people. I bet you didn't know that Trump and Biden deported basically the same number of people. Wow. But they did. And both of them were less than Obama. A lot less than Obama.
Yeah.
Half what he did in his first term.
Goat.
Goat of deportations. According to the DHS, 5,693 people were deported or removed to 121 countries in the 2 weeks between Inauguration Day until February 3rd, 2025. 5,693, okay? The last monthly figures available for Biden's presidency was November 2024, 700 deportations a day.
Whoa.
Almost twice Trump's rate. Okay, so Biden deported plenty. Now, to be fair, Biden had way more removed from the border. Trump totally cracked down on the border in a way that Biden has not, or Biden did not. So that made his job easier. But still, he was out deporting Trump. And my point is also, it's hard to deport people. If you go Trump's rate, forget Biden and Obama for a second. Just look at his rate of 5,693 for the first 2 weeks. That's an annual rate of 150,000 per year. The guy is pretending he's going to deport 12 million people in 4 years. And he's doing 150,000 a year.
Yeah.
For those who are really bad at maths, that's 600,000 for his entire term. That's short of 12 million. And it's let's look at the number of deportation flights. That tells you how hard they're going. Trump took over on January 20, right?
Yes.
So that's 64% of the way through January. Okay, I've done the maths for you. There are 109 deportation flights in January. 65 were before Trump, 44 were after. So Biden was responsible for 60% of the deportation flights in 64% of the time. So the rate increased a tiny amount under Trump. A tiny amount. Really? Nothing changed. The reason why Biden deported twice as many was because he was more efficient in the flights. But it's because he hadn't just started, like Trump just started. He'll become more efficient as time goes on.
Yeah.
So actually, to be fair, going, Biden deported twice as many is actually kind of unfair. The fact is, they're not going to end up going at the same rate. That's what's going to happen. Because Biden was going at the maximum possible rate for the funding they had. Trump right now has the same funding. So he's going to go at the same rate, essentially.
Until he increases funding.
Which he's going to.
Yeah.
Biden tried to increase funding for deportations and they didn't let him. Remember, that was the bill he was trying to get through. Would have had extra money for, number one, immigration court. So they would have gotten through more people in immigration court faster.
Yeah.
So then you could deport more people. And also for deportations. He actually had a higher budget for deportations. They didn't pass the bloody bill. Duh. So angry about that bill not passing. Anyway, the most telling part, though, to show you that deportations are a problem for Trump, and no matter how much he pretends, he's not doing very well with them or no better than Obama or Biden did. Since February 3, not a single peep about deportation numbers. I don't know what's happened since February 3. They're not public.
Interesting.
That's telling. And in this field...
Well, the Doge boys just deleted them all? Or?
Doge boys have been kind of quiet about this. And in this field, there's just so little transparency. They only tell you things when they want you to know things. I hate this about immigration news. Like it's just... When I'm trying to find... I go through their websites, their official numbers. It's impossible to navigate your way through that bloody website. It's just made to be as opaque as possible.
Jeez.
And they just don't put stuff up. They just don't. Things like gotaways, you only find it out when they want you to know. It's so annoying. But yeah, and now deportations are one of those things that Trump doesn't want you to know. Pretty important thing. Criminal records is the next problem. People want to see criminals being arrested. Like I said before, that's where the polling is. Remember the Washington Post poll? Deporting undocumented immigrants who aren't criminals, only 39% approved, 57% disapproved. Recall, last year, there was a story. I'm not sure if you were around at that point in time, Lockie.
Let's find out.
When Trump and Steve Miller were falsely claiming there were over 400,000 criminal aliens wandering around. Do you remember that story?
Not ringing a bell,
No. Okay. For those who don't remember, ICE put out a memo, because they wanted people to know, saying that there were, I think it was like 14,000 murderers, I've forgotten the number of rapists, and 400,000 people with criminal records were illegal immigrants. And Trump and Miller went, look, that's what, they're the people who came under Kamala Harris because the open borders, look at that. I explained in exquisite detail how much bullshit that was, that number was actually the number of total illegal immigrants in America who had committed those crimes at some point in time. They might have come at any point in time, not under Kamala Harris. In fact, more of them came under Trump than came under Biden. Also, they weren't roaming free to commit whatever crimes they liked. They were in jail. That's where people who commit crimes end up, in jail. Some of them were previously jailed in their previous country and then came to America afterwards. That number was just people who had committed a crime at some point in time. So some of them had served their time. Whatever. They were acting like these were all just marauding murderers during Kamala Harris. I got a clip here from Trump last year just to remind you of just how shameless they were about this.
That's over 647,572 migrant criminals who Kamala set loose to rape, pillage, thieve, plunder, and kill the people of the United States of America. And they're not going to change. They're only going to get worse.
I like how after rape and pillage, he clearly forgot, oh, wait, that's Vikings. What else happens?
Yes. I played that clip on the show that can't be named as well. I can name it Planet America. But I just want people to as many people as possible to see that clip because it's just incredible.
Yeah.
Dude. So just to be clear, there aren't that many migrant criminals, okay? A lot of them who have committed crimes are in jail. They're not just wandering around, okay? So that means that now it's all right to scaremonger when Kamala Harris is the person you're trying to get. But now that you're in charge, Trump, unfortunately, there aren't hundreds of people a day who you can arrest who have criminal records, like especially not murderers and rapists and pillagers. I reckon there are very few pillagers in America today. So they're having trouble. The first week they were cool, but then it starts to trail off. The Biden daily average of non-criminals being arrested in November 2024 was 39 per day.
Okay,
so non-criminals.
yes.
Because they were focusing on criminals. By the end of January, Trump was arresting how many non-criminals do you think a day? This is after 11 days.
Over 100?
550 a day.
Whoa.
71% of Biden's arrests in 2024 were of non-citizens with criminal convictions. 71%. Or pending charges, that is. 52% so far for Trump and dropping fast. That's going to be 30 or 40% before long because he's just running out of criminals. He's arresting as many people as he can, as fast as he can. Remember I said before, the arrests are coming fast, much faster than Biden. The deportations are not. There's a problem there coming, which we'll get to in a second. But the arrests are coming real fast. He's arresting as many people as he possibly can. But most of them are non-criminals and that becoming more so. For example, on Trump's first Sunday, 1,179 people were arrested. Only 613 of those were considered criminal arrests. That's 52%. Only 8 of them were in the worst criminals arrested category, which is a category for murderers and rapists and those people.
Sure, okay, right.
8 on the day out of the 1,179 people. And there were 2 gang members out of 1,179 people. That was on the first Sunday. And it's become much slimmer picking since then. Since February 1, the daily arrest counts, and in particular, the breakdowns of citizens versus non-citizens
Okay.
has disappeared.
Oh,
We have no idea what the numbers are
great.
now.
Convenient. Lovely.
Once again, telling. So, yeah, I hate how little transparency there is in immigration. All right, so there is a bid, therefore, to make not-so-scary people seem scarier, to try and fill that role of criminals.
I think there's a word for that, isn't there?
What's that word, do you think?
I'm
Fear-mongering?
trying
Is
to.
that the word
Oh,
you're looking
I was
for?
trying to think of like xenophobia or racism.
Oh, okay, you can
but-
use that one as well.
Yeah.
It's not so much, I mean, look,
But
what,
yeah.
what you're saying is correct, but it's in particular what they're trying to do is they're trying to turn gangs that aren't necessarily super scary into the new horrifying thing. Like in particular, Trendaragua, they've been trying to turn into this fearsome group. And look, I'm not saying there aren't some bad guys there in Trendaragua. All gangs have some bad guys. I'm not saying there's good guys. What I'm saying is that while there's some murderers there, a lot of that gang are petty thieves. They really are. Like, I'll read you a quote from an article in Wall Street Journal about these guys. This was meant to be a scaremongering article as well. Trendaragua members have found particularly lucrative territory in New York City, authorities said. They're accused of robberies at Macy's, Sunglass Hut, and upscale stores. And moped-riding gang members also have been blamed for snatching phones from unsuspecting pedestrians, said Joseph Kenny, Chief of Detectives for the New York Police Department.
I'm glad that New York is getting its own equivalent of Melbourne's African gangs.
Well, there is a bit of that.
Yeah.
The thing I found funny about that paragraph is that if I won't read to you again, but if you just go back and just replay and think of, instead of Trendaragua members, I was talking about macaques on the French Riviera. You know those cute monkeys that steal that pickpocket people and then run away? They ride mopeds. They steal phones out of people's hands. It applies. The macaque thing applies perfectly. Now, like I said, there are murderers. I don't want to be too low on this, but what I'm saying is that tell me their crime they've committed, not who they have a membership card with. And then I'll be interested.
I like that.
Okay, all right. I don't care if they hang around with dudes with like a tattoo of I don't know, Michael Jordan on their fucking arm. We'll get to the Michael Jordan tattoos in a second. I care about what crime they've committed. Are they murderers? If so, then they're scary. If they're a glorified macaque, they're not scary. They might be cute. As this is happening, all of what I've just said, they're also dealing with smarter people with more resources. I'm talking in the communities that they're raiding. When they're trying to arrest people, every day the people in those communities learn what their tricks are and are starting to respond accordingly. Right? So borders are Tom Homan.
Interesting.
And this is why Tom Homan hates the sanctuary cities so much, because in the sanctuary cities, they're the first to learn how you resist against ICE and against the borders are. So borders are Tom Homan. He actually complained on TV about how the migrants they were coming after were outsmarting them and knew how to resist them. This was him having a little whinge.
Sanctuary cities are making it very difficult to arrest the criminals. For instance, Chicago, very well educated. They've been educated how to defy ICE, how to hide from ICE. And I've seen many pamphlets from many NGOs. Here's how you escape ICE from arresting you. Here's what you need to do. They call it know your rights. I call it how to escape arrest. There's a warrant for your arrest, and they tell you how to hide from ICE. No, don't open your door. Don't answer questions. You can call it know your rights all you want, but there's an order for their removal. They've been ordered removed by a federal judge after due process at great taxpayer expense. They need to go. But if we got to play that cat and mouse game, that's what we're going to do till every one of them gone.
Poor old Tom Homan. He doesn't like them being educated. I just want you to imagine, for those, especially those watching it, but even those listening to it will hear this. The movie of Trump's immigration program, Tom Homan is totally getting played by Sylvester Stallone. With a bald wig, sure. With a bald wig, but the face and the voice is so Sylvester Stallone. Anyway, to give you an example of this, famously, ICE raided Aurora, Colorado, hoping to arrest 200 gang members. Remember, Trump was so hopped up last year on Aurora, Colorado and their gang members. Yeah. They ended up making 30 arrests. One of them was a gang member.
Oh, great.
The residents just knew what to do. And they knew how to deal with ICE. At one point, ICE actually thought there might be some FBI leaking reports of when they were coming because people were just so ready for them.
Wow.
But then they realized, no, they're just ready for us across the country now.
Wow. Which makes for a great movie.
It does, yeah, with Sylvester Stallone. And this is just making them so pissed off, especially Tom Homan. Oh, poor old Tom Homan. This is Tom Homan getting angry at AOC because she held a webinar for migrants called Know Your Rights. And there's nothing that makes Tom Homan angrier than people knowing their rights. Here he goes.
You went after Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for hosting a webinar for immigrants called Know Your Rights with ICE. I want to play what you said.
Is that impeding our law enforcement efforts? If so, what are we going to do about it? Is she crossing the line? So I'm working with the Department of Justice and finding out where is that line that they cross. So maybe AOC is going to be in trouble now.
Are you suggesting that she should be prosecuted?
I'm suggesting, and I'd ask the Department of Justice, where's that line on impediment, right? It's a broad statute. So I know impeding is someone stopping in front of me and putting their hands on my chest so you're not coming in here and arrest that guy. That's clearly impeding. But at what where's the line on impeding? So I'm asking the Department of Justice, who are the prosecutors, and decide who they prosecute and what the standards of that prosecution is. I simply says, at what point is that impeding? Because you can call it know your rights all you want. We all know what the bottom line is. The bottom line is how they invade law enforcement. Don't open your door. Don't answer questions. Here's what we're talking about. We're talking about people here in the country legally with a criminal conviction who had due process at great taxpayer expense and were ordered deported by a federal judge, but became a fugitive. And we're talking about don't open your door to ICE. You don't have to answer questions. I think it's more about how to invade law enforcement, not to get arrested, even though there's a federal warrant for your arrest. How to evade that rather than know your rights. Now, we can argue about that all day long. They have the right to know their rights. The Constitution said they have the right to certain rights, but also I hope to God we're not, educating people are going to be the next murder of a college student. I've said it before. If we would have had access to the man who murdered Lincoln Riley in New York, he would never make it to Georgia.
Let me just, to be fair, she said that
public safety threats escaping.
Poor Tom Homan. He's struggling so hard with the English language. He knows he's unhappy, but he doesn't know how to say why. And then AOC responded to him in a rather withering way. It's actually worth looking at the tweet. We'll put the tweet up. Because she did that internet thing where you type a quote in a series of caps and small letters in random places to make that person look like an idiot.
Sarcasm.
Yeah. I'll read it the way she meant it.
And I'll put the SpongeBob meme below
Please.
the reading, which is what that capitalization comes from.
Maybe she's going to be in trouble now, she writes. Maybe he can learn to read. The Constitution would be a good place to start, she says. I gotta say, I am developing a soft spot for Tom Homan. I didn't think I would. I didn't think I would because I'm very pro immigration and he's not. And,
Enemies to lovers. Here we go.
well, but the thing I like about him is that he's an old fashioned enforcer. Like he's a heavy. He's your mate, right? That you bring in to. So he's probably a thug. Like he probably carries a truncheon around. He's like that. That's his style. But the thing about Tom Homan, he follows the law.
Yes. Yeah.
He definitely follows the law. There is no doubt about that, which is more than I can say for a lot of this administration.
And you absolutely love people following the
I
law.
do.
Yeah.
I do. I love law-abiding people. Even if they are working against me and they are doing things that annoy me and they seem to really, really struggle. I just give the guy credit for just following the law. So, Tom, thank you for that. That's small mercies, man. I'll take what I can get. And especially in his role as borders are, the guy in charge of the raids, he could get up to all kinds of mischief if he wanted to. And so far, he seems to be by the book, even though it is comically blowing up in his face. The book has no pages to describe what he is coping with every single day.
Which is almost the same amount of pages that he could read anyway.
That's right. Yeah, I feel like they handed him the book and then they ripped out all the pages and then they handed it over to him and he's like, oh. So, poor old Tom Homan. But yeah, like at least he sticks.
That's not, yeah.
Yeah, like a
good silver lining.
He seems to be an honest fellow at the very least. Good on you, mate. So where's this leading? This is leading to. Sorry, just to be clear as well.
Yes.
I absolutely favour Tom Homan going around getting murderers and rapists and criminals and all the rest of it. Like just I am all for tough immigration enforcement of people who shouldn't be there. But I think that in America, they have a real problem drawing their legal immigration program is so dysfunctional. There are lots of people who are there who should be legally there, but they're illegally there.
Yeah.
And that's the problem, right? It's because after the carrots and sticks.
Yeah.
But now they've gotten rid of the carrots. So where's this leading?
He's really sad at how short the sticks are.
Yes. He would love baseball bats. That's what he would like. But if it's illegal, he won't use them. Where this is leading to, though, is if you're struggling to fill your arrest quota or your arrest numbers,
Yes.
because there just aren't that many criminals out there, Trump is trying to force them to arrest more people with quotas. There's a minimum number of daily arrests now of 1,500 a day. By the way, they never hit that quota.
No.
But they're trying to hit that quota because Trump wants them to. And they're just trying to get their numbers up as much as they possibly can to hit this quota, even for arrests that aren't really warranted. So what they're doing is they're scraping the bottom of the barrel harder and harder, arresting more and more low-hanging fruit. They're easy people to arrest, but low-value targets, just to get their numbers up, right? This is in response to the fact that just the people they want just aren't gettable.
Yeah.
ICE know where a bunch of productive migrants work. They know the factories. They know the orchards. They know the farms. They can just go and round them up whenever they want, but they don't, generally speaking, because they know that will piss people off. Because no one wants the farmers to get deported and the factory workers to get deported, right? But when they have to hit a quota, where are they going to go? So this week, we saw, I've just put up the article there, ICE busting 8 illegal aliens working in a bakery in the Rio Grande Valley in Texas. No criminals. They didn't think any criminals were there. They just wanted to just get their numbers up. So they just went and just picked up some bakers. Right? And they then charged the owners of the bakery with harbouring those illegal workers as well. So they just shut down the business.
Jeez.
Those people weren't hurting anyone. It's just the local bakery. The local bakery doesn't exist anymore.
Wow.
Gone. They don't want to do that. That's not what they want, but they're going to have to keep on doing that shit to hit these numbers. The more they do it, the less popular it's going to be.
And that's what's going to equate to the drop. Okay,
Exactly.
yeah, right.
Exactly.
Wow.
That's where we're at right now. This is about to become very unpopular very fast.
All you had to do was take away the bakeries.
That's right. Well, I can
Hit
sympathise.
the people where their hearts are.
Let me tell you, I'd be on the front of the line.
Oh, man.
Now, don't get me wrong, the arrests are continuing, and that's where the administration excels. In 18 days, they had arrested 11,000 illegal aliens. That's 611 per day. The last 8 years, the average was 300 per day. That's including Trump 1 and Biden. It was 312 under Biden, slightly less under Trump 1. Interesting. So there's twice as many arrests now. Well, to the extent that we have numbers. Also, twice as many arrests of criminals, twice as many arrests of gang members. Those are facts. They're doing well there. But here we come to the problem I raised before. Where do you put them? ICE can hold 41,500 detainees. They've got no funding. That's not many. They were basically full under Biden. So where are all these new arrestees going to go? The Bureau of Prisons has opened 4 different detention facilities. It's not enough. Of the roughly 8,000 migrants arrested in the first 2 weeks of Trump's administration, 460 were already released because they ran out of room. There was nowhere to keep them, so they just released them. They put anklets on them. That's what Biden used to do. Put anklets on them and release them. This week, they released another 160 people. Just this week. Sorry, last week. They released 160 people. Now, they're hoping to, they used to be called catch and release, by the way. That's what Trump says. You do catch and release. We don't do catch and release. Yeah, you do. You are doing catch and release because you've run out of room. The same way that Biden ran out of room. It's just the same thing again. They're hoping to build 14 new detention centres with 1,000 detainees and 4 new centres with 10,000 beds. The Department of Defense has authorized ICE to detain migrants at a Space Force base in Colorado. Like these are going to increase numbers, but not enough. They got so many arrests. They got 1,500. They're trying to get 1,500 a day. They're averaging in reality 600 a day, but that still just keeps on adding up and not going anywhere because they can't deport them. So the numbers just get so they need to find places to stash all these migrants. And they've begun experimenting with more dubious places, which we'll move to in a second. They've flew with tent camps on the border, but they fear security is too low there, so expect a lot of private prisons to be built in the next few years. Let's put it that way. There's going to be a lot, especially given that Pam Bondi was a lobbyist for private prisons beforehand.
Great.
Yeah. Importantly, though, everything I've just said is making a difference on the border. Undeniable success on the border. Numbers drop through the floor of people on the border.
Yeah.
The reason why is because they're seeing that dude, that fuck Trump guy getting the book. Oh gosh, shit, they're being serious about this. Like there's all these criminals. Oh, look at this, the raids, all these raids. That gets through. That filters through to everyone. Yeah. So no one is coming right now because they go, well, that's suicide.
Yeah.
Like they're just going to get me, right? So it works. Like that, talking tough works. Like this is, in a way, trying to stop numbers on the border is marketing. It's marketing that we're tough and
people.
mean and we've got sharp teeth, don't come. People believe you, they don't come. So, and Trump, we all know he's the master of marketing, and we all know that Biden was particularly bad at marketing. So that is a big difference, just marketing, right? Let's look at the numbers. This is the first few days of Trump, this graph right here. That is a 92% fall in border crosses immediately.
Wow.
Soon as Trump turned up. Huge drop off. Things have continued since then. These numbers we get. They like to give us these numbers. During the first half of February, they averaged 359 migrants on the southern border per day. 359. There was one day last week when there were only 229 interceptions on the entire southern border in one day. Let's put that in context. Biden in 2024, when he was going nuts, when he was deporting as many people as he could, arresting as many people as he could, denying asylum entirely or largely.
But being bad at marketing.
2,872 interceptions per day. 13 times as many as Trump.
Yeah.
And he was going really hard. I mean, to put as a point of comparison, that was less than half of what he did in his first 3 years. Okay, so he was trying, but still 13 times more than Trump. Marketing matters.
Wow.
It's a Trump specialty. In fact, they're continuing. They just invested $200 million in this ad right here.
If you come to our country and you break our laws, we will hunt you down. Criminals are not welcome in the United States. For too long, weak leadership has left our borders wide open, flooding our communities with drugs, human trafficking, and violent criminals. Well, those days are over. Under President Trump, we are defending American families and restoring their safety. If you try to enter illegally, you will be caught. You will be removed, and you will never return.
See, those are ads that Biden did not make. $200 million they're spending on that ad. Like overseas I'm talking about. Like they're running that in South America and Central America. And all
Yeah.
As an aside, these numbers I'm telling you, these tiny anemic numbers on the border, they're not all the border crossers. Don't forget there are the gotaways, the people who never get counted, the people who sneak through. We don't know how many gotaways there are. That's not just because they're not transparent. It's because it takes a while to count those numbers, right? Because they're hard, because they're ghosts.
By definition.
Yeah, exactly. Over the last 18 months, the gotaway numbers dropped a huge amount. Why? Because why would they sneak in when there were carrots, when they had the ability to come in illegally?
Yeah.
It worked. What Biden was trying to do worked. It reduced the number of gotaways. It reduced the number of people trying to sneak in. Now, my bet is the gotaways are going to start going up soon. Maybe not quite yet, because right now they're just going, why would we come in here now? It's so hot. But after a few months, they'll start going, What are they
Give it a
going to do?
Yeah.
Give it a crack. Yeah, I mean, they're only deporting 350 a day.
Yeah.
What are the chances? Let's go for it. And I bet you the gotaways go up. We'll see. We have been here before. The same thing happened in Trump's first term. Regardless, though, this has been a huge PR success for Trump up to now, until now. What's to come next, though? This is the easy period up to now. All the criminals, getting rid of the criminals to begin with and all the rest of it. We don't have problems storing them to begin with before it's full. Things start to become hard when you're out of resources, when it's full, when there's no criminals to get. This is when things start to become a bit hard. Same thing happened in Trump's first term, by the way. The more the news becomes about busting bakery workers, the less positive it's going to get. And there are a bunch of other cards that haven't been played yet that could be played that could make things a lot worse for Trump. Let's get into them. The dog's not barking. In Trump's array of executive orders on day one was a lot of scary shit. And he hasn't acted on almost any of it. He's just left it there, just hanging there. But as the conventional arrest and deport your way out of trouble method starts to fail, we might see him turn to some of these other theories. The Alien Enemies Act permits the arrest and removal of any non-citizen, including lawful residents, from a country that has perpetrated, attempted, or threatened an invasion.
And
he's declared an invasion.
Yeah.
So that means he could round up, harass, arrest, remove any Mexican non-citizen, even lawful immigrants.
Jeez.
Yes.
That'll be scary.
Yeah, he hasn't done that yet.
Yeah.
But he could.
And it's legal, so Tom Homan's happy to do it.
Yeah. Tom Homan would be totally happy to do it.
Well, sorry, legal.
Yeah, yes. And they'll be easy to find. Low-hanging fruit. You know where they are. They're lawful.
Oh, it's not even low-hanging fruit. It's on the ground.
Yeah, it's right. Exactly.
Sorry. It's not on the ground. It's being sold. It's there.
Yes, that's right. But yes, he hasn't acted on that yet. He has declared the right to, but he hasn't. Repelling the invasion. Remember, Trump has the army on the border. Doing what? We don't know. In the case of invasion, which he's declared, he can get the army involved in arresting migrants. Once again, he hasn't done that yet, but he reserves the right to get the army out there, start arresting people. He can. Going after cartels as terrorists. On day one, he declared that the cartels might be designated as terrorist organizations.
Yeah.
He asked Marco Rubio to go away and work on that one. Marco Rubio has responded. This week, they designated 9 cartels as terrorist organizations, including Trendaragua, the Macaques, and MS-13, and the Sinaloa cartel, amongst others. What that means is there are criminal penalties now for being involved with that organization. You could potentially have your assets seized if you're associated with them in any way. Now, to be fair, at least so far, Trump seems to just want to deport them and talk about how tough he is while he's doing that.
But their members and their leaders in the United States will be hunted down. I'm talking about MS-13. They're hunting them down. We removed tens of thousands, MS-13, Trendaragua, rooted out, arrested, and expelled from our soil like the savage monsters that they are.
Now, just to be clear, he hasn't deported tens of thousands of anyone, let alone tens of thousands of that particular gang.
Yeah.
Like, he's deporting 300 a day. But what he's saying there, we're deporting these guys, aren't I tough? That's not a problem. That's cool. You can do that. I have no problems with that. But once again, what could he do?
Right.
He could use the army to attack them in Mexico.
Whoa.
Because they're terrorists, right? That declaring a terrorist organization is what he did in his first term to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, and then he blew up Qasem Soleimani. He blew him off the earth in 2020. He could do that to cartel leaders.
Whoa.
If he wanted to. So potentially we could see a little mini war going on with the cartels and America. He's already seen spy drones over Mexico to check the cartels out. No actual conflict as yet, though. If that changes, could get very ugly.
Wow.
Very unpopular. Until now, the cartels have left Americans alone and American interests alone. Start fucking with the cartels, they'll start fucking with you. And there's plenty of Americans who go to Mexico for tourism reasons.
Yeah.
There's plenty of American companies, lots of interests that the cartels can attack if they want to.
Yeah.
Not to mention they can come to America. They know how to. They're very good at being gotaways. They can slip on through and they can get up to whatever mischief they want in Miami or in California. They can.
Well, and unlike bullying other world leaders, they will play dirty if they want to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Totally. They'll play dirtier than Trump will play.
Yeah.
And so that could get really ugly, especially if he starts blowing up parts of Mexico. It could turn the whole of Mexico against America. Mexico's done a lot to keep numbers down of migration, so that could screw up his border as well. Also, the Sinaloa cartel is basically part of the government. So if he wants to go to war with the Sinaloa cartel, he is going to
pick a fight.
He's going to pick a big fight with Mexico. So we'll see. Right now, it's not an issue, but it's just a potential issue down the road. Denying birthright citizenship, we've talked about that a lot. That's been held up by the courts. I think he's going to lose. But if he wins, then that could become a long-term issue for America, but not a short-term one because it only affect people born this year. Throttling visas. Trump slowed down visa processing considerably in his first term, almost to a crawl. Biden waived a lot of the process to speed processing up during his term, but they still didn't eliminate the backlog. It was such a bad backlog when Trump was finished. If Trump goes back to how he was going before, that would be incredibly annoying to a lot of people. It'll piss them off, especially those with relatives who are trying to migrate or they could just they'll come to visit. The public charge rule. In one of Trump's executive orders, he declared that he would stop all migration to prevent harm to the economic interests of the United States. So the quote is from to prevent harm to the economic interests of the United States, not stop all migration. That's code left over from his first term for what was called the public charge rule, which he tried to get up and didn't quite get there in the end. Back in the first term, the idea was to require proof of an income of at least 125% of the poverty line, or you weren't allowed into the country, or to stay in the country if you were there already legally. It's just a quick way of deporting lots of law-abiding people, poor people.
Poor law-abiding people.
Yeah. Low-hanging fruit, once again, in the store. At one point in time, Steve Miller
was not buying as much.
No, that's right. At one point in time, Steve Miller was talking about excluding legal immigrants who have incomes up to 250% of the poverty line. That was in the first term. Now, it's a particularly scummy rule. If they do implement it, which it's sitting there in an executive order, so he can. If they do implement it, expect a heavy backlash because all the companies rely on low-income migrant workers. If you start deporting them in particular, the companies are going to respond. Then there's the travel bans. Remember, he fought most of his first term over a travel ban to exclude a bunch of Muslim countries' citizens from coming over. Well, he's given the Secretary of State till March 21 to come up with a report identifying which countries, quote, for which vetting and screening information is so deficient as to warrant a partial or full suspension on the admission of nationals from those countries. The first term, it was Iran, Libya, North Korea, Somalia, Syria, Yemen, Nigeria, Kyrgyzstan, Eritrea, Myanmar, Tanzania, and Sudan. You could throw Venezuela in there. I can't believe that wasn't in the first list. And Trump has already said that he wants this time for the list to be longer. I assume I have the legals are sorted out this time since they spent 4 years arguing about this last time. So it's probably going to happen. But that is bad news for a few 100,000 people in America from those countries. But if the first term's any guide, when it came in, no one really cared. So he'll probably get away with that. But there is a kicker this time around. As part of the same executive order, the executive order is called Protecting the United States from Foreign Terrorists and Other National Security and Public Safety Threats, Trump called for extreme vetting of migrants. He ordered measures to be taken to promote a unified American identity and attachment to the Constitution, laws, and founding principles. He also has ordered actions to prevent harm to the economic, cultural, or other national interests of the United States. What does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean?
It means, he said, all immigrants must, quote, not bear hostile attitudes towards U.S. citizens, culture, government, institutions, or founding principles.
Count me out.
He made this clearer during the campaign when he said, quote, we're going to keep foreign Christian-hating communists, Marxists, and socialists out of America. That's pretty clear now.
Okay.
In
I
other
think
words,
I just won Trump bingo.
In other words, he wants to establish an ideology test for migrants. That's what he wants to do. If, say, for instance, you protested about Gaza, you might be in strife. The Republican 2024 platform read, in caps, deport pro-Hamas radicals and make our college campuses safe and patriotic again. The order invites the Secretary to suggest additional measures against those who call for, quote, the replacement of the culture on which our constitutional republic stands, which sounds like an anti-protest provision to me. This all sounds wildly unconstitutional, expected to go to the Supreme Court, also expected to be extremely controversial if they do this. It's just sitting there. Are they going to do it or not? And there's one more thing that's just sitting there. Remember DACA? DACA is the allowance of people who are born overseas, smuggled to America as 3-year-olds and 2-year-olds, etc., as little babies, grew up as American citizens effectively. They joined the army, they got a job, they went through school, went through college. They're American in every way. They have American accents. They know no other country other than America. They don't speak another language. They're just Americans. Their status runs out during Trump's administration. He could start deporting them. Is he going to do it? That's the first DACA kids to get deported. That's going to be controversial.
That'll be the big,
Yeah, that'll be pretty big. So all of those are just hanging around, just waiting to make things worse. It's going to be bad without any of those. Every single one of those ones I just said is going to make it worse, though. So this is why I'm so confident immigration is going to turn to the negative that we thought it was going to originally. There is one way, though, it's escalating right now, and that is where they're trying to keep them. Again, where are you going to keep them? And this, we already flagged before, is where the rubber hits the road when they send them to GITMO.
Christmas Island. Oh, sorry. Force of habit.
Dude, they wish they could get sent to Christmas Island. GITMO ain't Christmas Island. Let me tell you now. They reckon they can house 30,000 migrants there.
We have 30,000 beds in Guantanamo to detain the worst criminal illegal aliens threatening the American people. Some of them are so bad we don't even trust the countries to hold them because we don't want them coming back, so we're going to send them out to Guantanamo.
So full of shit. To be clear, they can't fit 30,000 migrants there. They don't have 30,000 beds. They hope to have 30,000 beds one day.
I don't think they have beds in Guantanamo.
Right now, it's funny. Actually, funny you say that. That is truer than you think. Right now, they have a migrant operations centre with 130 beds, and they've got a prison with 684 beds. A tent city is being built. So they don't have anywhere close to 30,000 beds. Who is there? Trump was pushing that worst of the worst thing. Every time you hear anyone talk about GITMO, it's always the worst of the worst. I'd love someone to define what that means, because the New York Times found someone who was sent there because he had the aforementioned Michael Jordan tattoo. Because some gangs apparently have NBA tattoos.
Okay, you're going to have to go detail here because I have no idea.
Yeah. Who Michael Jordan is,
Oh, no.
because you're 24.
I've seen Space Jam.
My
favorite vintage movie.
There are some gangs that have NBA tattoos. But you know what? Some people just have NBA tattoos because they like the NBA. It happens.
Yeah.
There was a guy there who had a Michael Jordan tattoo who they couldn't connect to gangs in any way other than his tattoo. And when they interviewed him, they decided he didn't appear to have any ties to gangs, but they sent him to GITMO anyway. So much for the worst of the worst. I should read you the quote from the DHS spokesperson talking about this dude who, once again, his interviewer felt he didn't have any ties to gangs and they had no evidence when they sent him other than his Michael Jordan tattoo. This is Tricia McLaughlin. She says, during further assessment, intelligence officers could not definitively determine whether the individual is or is not a confirmed member of TDA. He may very well be a member of this vicious gang. He may not be. And then, after that, she said that they might have found some evidence he could be associated with TDA, but she wouldn't indicate what that was. She continued, TDA is a pathetic gang for human trafficking, drug trafficking, and kidnap for ransom, among other heinous crimes. The New York Times is more interested in writing sob stories about its disgusting members than justice for its victims. That's the spokesperson for DHS. How about the conditions? You talked about them not having beds. Back in the mid-90s, they apparently housed 45,000 Haitian and Cuban migrants at GITMO before it was used as a terrorist prison. But for what it's worth, we spoke to Harold Coe on Planet America. He fought the Clinton administration about keeping migrants there in the 90s, and he said they never had more than 30,000 people. He also noted that legally, it's much more dodgy now than it was then, even though he thought it was dodgy then, because back then they intercepted people at sea and brought them to GITMO.
Wow.
So they never got to America.
Yeah.
So they never had any rights. Whereas these people now are being sent from America to GITMO.
Mm.
They have rights in America. You can't just take their rights away and send them to GITMO. Like, once you have the rights, you keep the rights.
Mm.
So it's way more illegal to take someone from America and send them to GITMO than to take someone from somewhere else, put them in GITMO, but don't let them get to America.
Mm.
Like, that's their loophole they've been relying on. This time, there's no loophole. They're just fucking themselves up. So
Tom Homan will be furious.
That's right. It's not his way. So anyway, these people, so these people, we don't know what their conditions are going to be in yet because they're only just arriving. But in the past, when they had 30,000 people, the conditions were horrific. They didn't have beds. They actually literally slept on the ground.
Mm.
They were served food that had maggots in it. The latrines were brimming over. There was only water in a cistern in 40-degree temperatures. So it was like boiling in the hot sun, this water. When you drank it, it gave you diarrhea. Rats crawled over the people at night. They had several hundred HIV patients who were denied medical care and isolated in separate spaces, cordoned off with barbed wire. So it wasn't great. Like old Bill, he didn't run a tight shop in Guantanamo. Now, for what's worth, Kristi Noem says, no, we're not doing that shit. She's saying they're going to have the same legal rights as anyone would in America.
Due process will be followed, and having facilities at Guantanamo Bay will be an asset to us, and the fact that we'll have the capacity to continue to do there what we've always done. The plan is to have a process that we follow that's laid out in law and make sure that we're dealing with these individuals appropriately according to what the state and the national lawsuit or law directs. So we will work with Congress to make sure that we're addressing our legal immigration laws and using Guantanamo Bay appropriately. Remember that Guantanamo Bay, clearly, by this president, has said that it will hold the worst of the worst, that we are going after those bad actors.
So watch out, Keanu Reeves. They're coming for you. For the bad actors. That was early on that she said that. Since then, there's been complete confusion about what laws apply in GITMO. They even know who's in charge. They don't know if the Department of Defense is in charge or DHS is in charge. They literally are still arguing about this. So no one is in a position to say what rules will apply because they don't even know who's making those decisions. Yeah. So they don't even know if the detainees are going to have access to legal or social services.
Wow.
They got no idea.
Sounds like the recipe for success.
It does, doesn't it? And yet they're sending migrants there. Those migrants are already there. They're sending them they've got a couple of hundred there already, and they're sending more every day. Is there any legal authority at all? the Department of Defense had very specific legal authority for the military detainees at Guantanamo. It was the 2001 authorization for use of military force after 9/11, which was about being able to imprison and go do whatever necessary for the people who struck out in 9/11, right? That doesn't apply to migrants. So it doesn't apply to people with Michael Jordan tattoos. There is zero legal authority to move these people out of America when they have rights in America into a legal grey zone. So this is definitely going to the Supreme Court. We'll see what happens there. That's not the only place they're going to. Costa Rica's opened its borders. They've received one flight of 200 deportees from Central Asia and India. Panama has received at least 3 flights of deportees, 350 people. First, they were in a hotel for a week. Then they were kept in a camp in the jungle. Don't think it was one of those fun camps like I'm a Celebrity, get me out of here.
I thought the same reference.
I don't think it's like that. I mean, they might be eating spiders, but I don't think they're fun spiders.
Julia Morris isn't there.
Yeah, as well. That is the one thing going for them in the Panamanian camp.
Oh, me.
Apparently, they've got cages. One of the deportees says it looks like a zoo. There are fenced cages. That's nice. Panama law says they're not supposed to be imprisoned without court order for more than 24 hours, but they are. It's not clear any of this is legal. El Salvador, President Bukele has made an offer. Quote, we've offered the United States of America the opportunity to outsource part of its prison system. We're willing to take in only convicted criminals, including convicted U.S. citizens, into a mega prison in exchange for a fee. The fee would be relatively low for the US, but significant for us, making our entire prison system sustainable. He offered the same thing during Trump's first term. COVID got in the way, unfortunately, for his mega prison. Might not be great, given the country's prisons are already operating at over 300% capacity. So it might not be ideal. That might violate the 8th Amendment ban on cruel and unusual treatment. I suspect it might.
Yeah.
Even Trump acknowledges it's probably illegal. He said, if we had the legal right to do it, I'd do it in a heartbeat. I bet you would. I bet you would. But think just how illegal something has to be before Trump says, yeah, that's probably illegal. Sorry, guys, I'm not going there. Have some respect for the laws, guys. That's one of the very few times him and Tom Homan are seen eye to eye. Yeah. So every option is shit, basically, which is another reason this is going to get more unpopular because those arrest numbers aren't going to drop. So it's going to get worse and worse.
Is there a win for him here? Trump? Yeah.
It's a huge win on the border numbers. There's a short term massive win.
Yes, but
massive win.
But long term, people will either start being really unhappy, or they'll start being unhappy when he stops deporting as many people.
Well, look, my prediction is that. Okay, well, first of all, I'll tell you how.
Sure, we'll answer now. Yeah,
I'll tell you how he does well. He will do well if he can get enough funding from Congress to deport enough people fast to keep the pipeline going.
Sure.
That's the first thing. He needs to stop the backlog. That's the first thing. If he can reduce the congestion of the deportation pipeline, that will help him. Number one. It will, if he can create these new pools of people to deport that he can vilify.
Yes.
That will work for him as well.
Okay.
But I reckon in the long run, he's screwed either way. He's screwed anyway because he's going to want to keep – he's just got this thing about getting rid of all the illegal immigrants, right?
Yeah.
Stephen Miller ain't going to stop.
Yeah.
Right? And so eventually he's going to run out of bad guys to get rid of. And then he's going to hit he's going to hit the bakers.
He's going to start,
Yeah. And so I
long term, it's a lose-lose.
And so I would say there's no way he's going to keep this up for 4 years.
Yeah.
I'd say at best for him, I think he's already running aground unless he gets more money. If he gets more money, he might be able to keep this going for another 6 months. But I reckon by the time we get to 2026, I think he's running aground anyway.
I just realized why it doesn't matter though if he loses, because then he just says, "We got rid of them all. I won. I did it," and just markets that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's probably what he's going to do. You're probably right.
Okay.
At some point in time.
So okay. Well,
But
thank
yeah.
you.
Anyway, we'll see. But the fact is that at least right now, there's got to be a strife. Also, it's just, I mean, how much do you trust his judgment when it comes to illegal immigration? Like, he's got so many swords of Damocles just dangling at the moment. Like, it's like he's basically like one of those jugglers at the at like a tourism place. He's juggling about 12 of these knives, 12 of these swords, and he's swallowing them at the same time.
Yeah.
And just
But
like,
lined up below him is 12 million illegal criminals, and he's willing to drop the sword at any point as well.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Anyway, so we'll see.
Sure. Thank you.
And the last thing I say about this is that all these pressures are building tension with sanctuary cities, which make ICE's job that much harder.
Yes.
Tom Homan, it just gives him an ulcer. Right? A reminder of what a sanctuary city is a place where government officials don't comply with requests for information from ICE. In particular, they don't hold illegal immigrants in jails till ICE can pick them up, which makes ICE's job way harder. Some jurisdictions will hold bad criminals for ICE, but not minor criminals. Trump hates them. The acting Assistant Attorney General sent a memo on day one to prosecutors saying that they should take all steps necessary to protect the public and secure the American border by removing illegal aliens from the country and prosecuting illegal aliens for crimes. And federal law prohibits state and local actors from resisting, obstructing, and otherwise failing to comply with lawful immigration-related commands and requests. The U.S. Attorney's offices and litigating components of the Department of Justice shall investigate incidents involving any such misconduct for potential prosecution. So it's about charging them, the sanctuary cities. Trump also wants to restrict transportation funds to cities that refuse to help mass deportation. We'll see if that's legal.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be legal.
No.
47% of people, according to Pew, approve of Trump's plans to cut federal funds to cities and states if they do not help federal deportation efforts. That was 2 weeks ago, so it's probably more like 37% now. So can federal immigration authorities command or request that state officers participate in immigration enforcement? The answer is no. The first Trump administration sued to force states to comply. They lost. There's a federal law that does say that state or local government entity or official may not prohibit or in any way restrict any government entity or official from sending to or receiving from the Immigration and Naturalization Service information regarding the citizenship or immigration status, lawful or unlawful, of any individual. But not prohibiting them does not mean making them comply. They are two different things. You can't stop them, but you can't make them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Resisting or obstructing federal law enforcement, crime. Choosing not to help, fine. In fact, the 10th Amendment's anti-commandeering rule clearly prohibits the federal government from ordering state officials to do anything, to detain people for immigration purposes or anything else. San Francisco, in fact, is suing the federal government in response over their plan to prosecute local officials. So we'll see where this is going. I'm guessing it's going nowhere. Bottom line, we're just about finished here. I suspect immigration is gonna start getting on the nose soon, but it won't become fully toxic until Trump opens one of those doors he's judicially kept closed for now. I think I've said enough about immigration.
Once those bakers are gone, that's when the oven gets hot.
Honestly, that didn't make sense to me, but
No, it didn't.
sounded like it almost made sense. So we'll take that.
I take my speech writing skills from Tom Homan.
I thought so. Okay, time for our key interview. This is Lanhee Chen. He was Mitt Romney's chief policy advisor, number one policy advisor for Mitt Romney. He actually ran unsuccessfully to be the California comptroller in the 2024 election, so he does have ambitions, I think. I never ask him directly, though, because I don't want to be one of those interviewers. He's currently associated with the Hoover Institution, Stanford, and the Amtrak Board of Advisors, which he just joined. He's one of my favorite people to interview, full stop. For a start, whenever I talk to him, I feel like the whole last decade didn't happen. He's a lovely conservative.
It is a very nice interview. Yeah.
He's a lovely conservative. Oh, you watched it? Oh, good. Yeah. That's nice. Yeah. He's a lovely guy. He's erudite. He's intelligent. He's fundamentally decent. I've never once seen him undertake a partisan drive-by. Never. and he answers your questions directly, which is
Yes.
a pleasure. And, you might not agree with his answers. I mean, he is conservative, right? You might not agree with his answers. There's a few things he said in this interview that I disagree with. There's plenty I agree with that you probably would disagree with me about as well. Me and him agree on a lot of things. Not everything, though, but that's okay. I just like talking to someone who operates in a sphere of rational discussion. That's nice. It's a nice sphere. It's a cozy sphere. I also feel like he offers just about the strongest form of any kind of conservative argument. Whenever something happens with Trump and you want someone to actually justify it, he's the guy to go to. He'll put the best argument forward. It'll be a decent argument. You know, like you might not agree with it, but it's at least decent. If any actual bipartisan policy success is going to happen in America one day, it's going to happen through people like Lanhee Chen. So we should all cheer for him, I reckon. I don't know if he's ever going to become an actual political player in the Republican Party or not, but I hope so. I got 30 minutes with him on the weekend for this interview. It's worth about an hour with anyone else because he answers so quickly. Bang, bang, bang. But look, he says he's coming to Australia later in the year, and if I can get him for longer, I absolutely will because I really only had time to rush through a few topics with half an hour. And I could talk to this guy forever. I love him. Still, enjoy. Lanhee Chen. Hey, Lanhee. I was really keen to chat to you because you're a California Republican. You're extremely intelligent and policy-based, importantly. So I felt like you'd have some unique takes on the second Trump administration to date. So let's start generally. What are your top line opinions of the first month of the new administration?
Well, I think President Trump is doing kind of exactly what he said he would do. You know, I mean, there's really been very little that surprised me in terms of whether it's the policy orientation or the degree to which he really is. I mean, we've discussed this in terms of flooding the zone, the degree to which he's completely overwhelmed the news cycles. And, you know, if you look at the reporting here in America, at least, it is predominantly preoccupied, I would say, with President Trump and what he's doing. And there's very little oxygen for anything else. And whether it's the nature of what he's doing or the substance of what he's doing, it is pretty consistent with what we expected out of a Trump presidency. So in that sense, I think, you know, for detractors of the president, there are some very obvious targets. For supporters, he's delighted them with some of the things he's done. But I don't think anything is a particular surprise, Chaz, if you look at all the things that have happened.
The flooding the zone thing, he was trying that in the first term as well, but it's been different this time. His approval is somewhere between 48 and 50 generally, sometimes
much higher.
Sometimes 52, 53. Do you think that this is just a second honeymoon, or do you think he's actually cracked the code and he's broken through with the American people?
I think it might be a combination of different factors. So first of all, it's as I said, you know, I think when you do what you say you're going to do, you get some credit, right? Now, a lot of what he's done, not all of it, but a lot of it is fairly popular stuff. You know, I mean, it's getting tough on the narco criminals. It's trying to figure out how to secure the border. It's even the stuff with Doge in terms of cutting the size of government. I think that's generally pretty popular. Some of the stuff he's done in terms of holding foreign governments accountable, you know, the tariff policy, which is quite complicated, but I think a lot of Americans look at it. They're like, yeah, look, we can raise some money by charging other countries. Let's go for it. So my sense is that it's a combination of doing what he says he's going to do, some policies which are going to be broadly popular, which I think outnumber the policies that aren't, quite frankly. And then I think he is just really good at taking what he's doing and describing it in a way that anybody can understand. Now, you can disagree with his characterization of what he's doing. You can disagree with the implications and the impact of what he's doing. But he's quite masterful, I think, at describing his agenda in a way that very few politicians, I mean, I've seen a lot of politicians, Chaz, trying to talk about what it is they're going to do and how they do it. And no one quite gets to the heart of the matter the way Donald Trump does. And I think that combination of things has made him more popular, much more popular in his second term than he was in his first, and I think gives him a lot more ceiling, frankly, than he had the first time around as president.
Look, I agree that there is a real sense out there that Trump is, number one, just doing something in a way that Biden was not. At least
I think
there
that's
was,
right.
yeah, at
It's,
least there
it's
was a
by
sense.
comparison. By
Yeah.
comparison, yeah.
Yeah, very much so. Also, I've noticed that he seems to be perpetually checking off the boxes from his campaign, saying, "Okay, I promised to do that. I'm now doing that." Like he's very much stuck to what he promised last year, which is unusual. Just how closely he's stuck to what he promised. He holds press availabilities every day, which is also a contrast to Biden. But this is my question: is in terms of actual achievements, is he actually doing anything? Because executive orders, they don't achieve much. What he seems to be doing to me is seeming to achieve goals, but at worst, they're nothing. They're just PR. And at best, they seem to be often a house of straw that will blow over as soon as the next Democrat turns up in 4 years or 8 years' time. Do you disagree with me there? And if so, what would you say he's pulled off in terms of lasting achievements?
Well, it's a good point about executive action. I think that the danger in any executive action is that you do it and the next president comes along and invalidates it. And we're in that cycle now in American politics, by the way, because Congress is completely impotent. They don't do anything, right? Congress, if you look over the last 10 years, there's a couple pieces of legislation they've done that have been impactful, and that's pretty much it, right? But if you look at it on a regular basis, Congress's ability to do really big things has been limited by the polarization we've seen in American politics. So the executive feels like they need to step in and do more, and this executive certainly has. And the danger, as you note, is it's very easy to overturn that. Now, in terms of what he's actually done that's impactful, I'll say a couple things in that regard. First of all, he has done a good job of influencing the private sector to do various things. Great example of that is DEI. Now, you've actually seen with DEI a very narrow set of executive actions, I would argue, that implicate a relatively small percentage of the economy and mostly federal contractors and federal workforce and things of that nature. But if you look at the reaction of private industry in the US, it's been enormous. They're responding even though they're not required to. So has he had impact? Absolutely. In that way, he's had impact. Now, how much of it's lasting? How broad is it beyond DEI? Those are all very fair questions. And I think that by and large, I've always argued that executive action is always much more about the show than anything else. And so I do think it's fair to question what the actual limits and bounds of that executive action are, because there are limits. And most of the time, if you look at some of these executive actions, it's like, hey, go study this. Go form a commission to do this, which, at the end of the day, you're right, is not particularly impactful. But the influence on the private sector, the influence on other people, the influence on countries around the world. I mean, you look at the behavior of some of the countries that have had to deal with Trump on tariff issues, on immigration issues. Those reactions and responses are really, I think, part and parcel of what Trump is aiming for when he does all of these things.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite policy to date from Trump, both in terms of what you like or what you think he should be doing?
Well, I mean, look, I think that bringing some restraint to the federal government and some of the stuff that we've seen from DOJ, of course, is going to be controversial. There's some stuff where they went too far too fast. Even they've admitted that, I think. But the idea of really needing to impose some amount of restraint on the size of government, on the scope of government in the US, that I think is long overdue. Now, will that actually end up resulting in meaningful deficit reduction and meaningful spending reduction? So far, we haven't seen those numbers add up to a number that's big enough. Now, over time, maybe you put enough together, maybe you get there. But the posture and attitude of saying we're not going to let the federal government continue to go with business as usual. We are going to shake things up, and it is going to disrupt some things. That, to me, I react very favorably to that, because I think that that's actually something that's necessary. And whether you like it or not, I think those of us who follow the U.S. political system closely and the U.S. System of government know that some of this is long overdue, quite frankly. And Trump is probably one of the only guys who could have come along and done it and really had the guts in some ways to do it, because he's getting backlash. There's no question. You look at the coverage, it's not all positive. In fact, most of it's not positive. He doesn't care. He doesn't. I mean, he just sort of is like, look, I'm going to keep doing this. So anyway, that's probably the thing I'd point to where I feel, okay, there's actually some progress potentially being made here.
And is there an area that he hasn't mentioned yet, or maybe Republicans in general haven't mentioned yet, that you would desperately like to see action over the next 4 years that you think is possible, or that's not unrealistic for a Republican administration?
The possible thing is where you got me, because
Okay, sorry.
I really feel like entitlement reform.
Yeah.
Really looking carefully at what is driving the longer term trajectory of spending in America right now, and that is predominantly the entitlement programs. It's Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid. Now, Trump has been a little bit more gray on Medicaid, which by the way has undergone tremendous growth since passage of the Affordable Care Act in 2010. That's an area where I'd argue some spending restraint is necessary, and I think Trump could be going there. But I've heard some Republicans talking about the need for reforms of the entitlement programs. But I'm skeptical that anything beyond, I think Medicaid could end up seeing some reform in this process, probably not to the extent that it needs. Medicare and Social Security, I'm much more skeptical about. To your point, I think the politics there are much harder. But all that being said, I think just having this conversation and having the discussion is hugely impactful, and does have the potential to move us as a country, I think, in the right direction.
Yeah, I'm going to revisit that if we have time a little later, because that debt is something I'm into as well. I just want to just quickly ask you your critique of Joe Biden from a policy perspective, because it seems to me Joe Biden had a lot of policy and supposedly lasting policy. There was the CHIPS Act, there's the Infrastructure Bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, which was basically a green subsidy scheme, let's face it. And yet there is a sense that a lot of it didn't seem to work as hoped. It didn't seem to have tangible results, at least in the first 2 to 3 years. We haven't seen much bang from the Infrastructure Act so far. I mean, there's still more to come, I guess. The CHIPS Act seems to have promoted chip manufacturing almost at the expense of other kinds of manufacturing. It seemed to have crowded out manufacturing. The Inflation Reduction Act, I think, was probably most infamous because of its electric charging stations. There were meant to be 500,000 of them, and now I think there's about 250 the last I saw. I'm sure the hundreds of thousands are yet to come, but there was this policy which took 6 years to roll out. As a policy wonk, what do you think Biden got wrong?
Unfortunately, I think for him a lot. First of all, on the Inflation Reduction Act, even naming it that was crazy. I mean, to your point, it was a green subsidy bill masquerading as an economic relief bill. And I think that one of the things we saw in the Biden administration was the overemphasis on industrial policy, which in the American economy, I think is going to have a very difficult time working, because whenever government decides to muck around in a market in any substantial and real way, as we saw in a few of these different industries, you do end up, I think, with a very problematic set of outcomes, and the market doesn't tend to react the way you would expect it to. And so I think there's no question in my mind that the Inflation Reduction Act was not effective in the way it was meant to be. Infrastructure, I still have some hope for in the long run. I think, some of that work is desperately needed, whether it's roads and bridges and highways and airports and train infrastructure, which I'm involved in now as a board member of Amtrak, which is our national rail system here in the U.S. I really think that the infrastructure bill could have longer lasting impacts, but CHIPS is a great example of something which initially may have had some promise, but I think then the question becomes, what do you follow it up with, right? How do you really create a sustainable industry in America? And one piece of legislation is not going to do it, right? So are we really going to commit to an industrial policy approach, which Trump has suggested in some areas he might be willing to do, or are we going to sort of abandon the experiment, recognizing that probably doesn't work in America? So there's a lot of questions around that, but overall, I would say that unfortunately, from an economic policy perspective, what he managed to do was to push up inflation, to make things more affordable, which ultimately led to his political demise and the demise of his party in a lot of ways. And I think it's unfortunate because the promise of Joe Biden coming into office, the notion of a more moderate leader who would really look to make the kinds of changes that America needed to make its economy sustainable, for example, for decades to come. Those didn't get made because he got pushed by the left wing of his party. And we ended up with policy that really wasn't as feasible and durable as it should have been.
I feel like, maybe this is just me, I feel like this government at the moment is more responsive to, let's call them weirdos on Twitter, than any government I have ever seen, especially the Doge wing. Do you agree? And does that worry you at all?
Well, it is definitely a new infrastructure of media and support around the president, around the White House. I mean, I counsel businesses on this all the time. It's a totally different environment if you're thinking about influencers. And you're right that I call them vectors. The vectors into policymaking are dramatically increased, and the way in which some of those vectors can surface is truly out of nowhere. You know, it truly comes out of nowhere. So it's such a weird thing. I mean, I look at the new so-called MAHA universe, the Make America Healthy Again. I mean, that's an example of a whole ecosystem. A lot of people in health policy have never had to deal with this ecosystem before. Totally new ecosystem, totally new set of constituents, many of whom are making really good points. It's just coming in a really unconventional way, right? So I think it's intriguing to see how that discussion has shifted, and the online discussion has shifted completely. It is a much more digital savvy, online first kind of White House than even the Biden White House, or certainly on Trump 1. So it's super different.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about Doge. You brought it up before, and it's an area which I'm quite interested in. I think that you and I would both agree, from what you've said so far, that an efficiency drive in government is desperately needed. Also, reducing deficits is desperately needed. And they're not the same thing, by the way. You can be efficient and have deficits, and you can have deficits and not be efficient.
Yeah.
But I think they're both needed. I worry that Doge isn't enough like that, though. It feels to me like they are often concerned with culture warriors, with culture warring, especially on social media, than they are in achieving government reform, genuine government reform. What do you think about that?
Yeah, what I worry about there is a little bit around the picking and choosing how to make examples out of things, right? And that's to your point about social media. Sometimes it feels like driving narrative might be more important than the longer run reforms that are needed. And some of what they do, I think, is absolutely right. Some of it, I sort of wonder, well, maybe it's right or wrong, but it's not very impactful. And there's some of it that, I do think is going to result in some pain. And what I really would hope they would focus on is the longer run. How do we really reform and systematically change the way government does its business so that it can be more effective? I do think that because there is a preference placed on driving the social media narratives, driving what's happening in the news media, what you tend to lose sight of when you do that is the longer term systemic stuff. So I'm not counting out the possibility they could get there. But for now, at least, it does feel to me a little bit like, hey, let's pick and choose some examples, and let's really make an example out of this, or let's really figure out. And a lot of it is in the cultural war category, I think. But I don't think that's unique to Doge. I think this administration has had a focus on some of these cultural war things, in part because politically in America, we're in a moment now where a lot of that works, especially if you're talking about cultural issues where there's a significant alignment in favor of where the administration is. And I think they're not doing it blindly, right? I think they're doing it in a very clever way, which is to say, we're going to pick some issues, we're going to drive those issues really hard, and we're going to have confidence that when we drive those issues, those are 80-20 issues for us. And it's probably not 80-20 in terms of support, but 60-40 is not bad in our political environment. And that's where they're getting to on a lot of these things.
I think both you and I agree that where the real cuts are obviously Medicare and Social Security and Medicaid. I would argue you should add defence to that as well until they pass an audit. I'd say they're your main areas. But as you say, politically, that is suicide to try and go there. Now let's put the politics aside for a second. Let's say that you have a receptive public that will listen to reason. Okay, just for a second. Just imagine. All right, now, is there a way, in your view, to make substantial cuts, like trillion-dollar cuts, to the future of Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid in a way that isn't going to screw people over? Let's leave aside the political backlash, but just talk about fairness of policy and good policy. Is there a way to make cuts that is not going to sacrifice the healthcare of poor people or old people or pensions? Is there a way? Is there a middle ground there if you can get past the politics to make actual achievement?
Look, I think there is, and I think if you look back to we had something called the Simpson-Bowles Commission back in the early 2010s, and the idea was, let's bring together a group of Republicans and Democrats and let's figure out how do we systematically reform entitlements, how do we reform our fiscal system to make it more sustainable. And they proposed a number of changes, which I think were real changes. They were going to make cuts is one way to think about it, but you could argue, for example, if you look at Social Security, let's just start there as a microcosm of this. That's our old age program, old age survivors program that essentially is a pensioners program. The way it works in America, essentially, you could be a multi-billionaire and still get your Social Security benefits because you have earned them over the course of your life. And the concept is because they come out of your paycheck when you're working, you ought to be able to get them back at some point later on in life. Now, I've talked to a number of very wealthy people who say to me, you know what, I don't need it. Okay, give it to someone who actually needs it. And so there've been ideas, for example, to slow the growth in benefits as you get wealthier, so that it's not so much that you don't get the benefit, Chaz. It's just saying your benefit grows a little more slowly over time if you're wealthy, and you take that delta and you plow it into an enhanced benefit for people who are poorer, or you take those savings and you spend them somewhere else. That concept, or another one, raising the retirement age, which I know is considered crazy. We've already been doing that, by the way. I think we've raised the retirement age by 2 years over 30 years. Over the last 3 decades, we've raised it 2 years. Life expectancy has gone well past what we have done in terms of adjusting the retirement age. So if you were to take the retirement age and look at that over a long run, could we adjust it up a little bit more? Little changes make a massive fiscal difference in a program as big as Social Security. So look, I'm much more keen on the notion of what we call means testing Social Security, so that people who are wealthier are getting slower growth. That to me seems like a no-brainer kind of idea. And then there are others that might be more controversial. The basic point is we have put together a series of ideas in the past that have tried to address some of the challenges that we're facing now. And if we'd done them 10 years ago, we wouldn't have a problem now. We'd have a lot more to spend actually on all these random things people want to spend money on. The basic point is that the failure to address and deal with the issues around these entitlement programs make them all that much harder to deal with in the future. And that's really what I am concerned about, is we will have a reckoning on Social Security and Medicare. It is happening. And when we get there, we're going to have to make drastic cuts or drastic changes because we don't have a choice. Now we have a choice. So let's do it now before we have to get forced into making a choice down the road.
Is there, and I understand that it's, as a Republican, you may run for office in the future. You might not be in interest to answer this question, but let me throw it out there. Is there a tax that you could possibly see either being increased or being introduced that you think is policy-wise a good idea?
Well, look, I think looking at the tax system as a whole and figuring out how do we make the system more efficient and effective, and in some cases that is going to mean at the very highest ends, do we have the optimal tax rate? Is it too low? It's probably not too low in America. The question becomes, is there something you can do there? Is there something we can do with taxing services? Because in the US, we're very good at taxing goods. We're not as good at taxing services, right? I haven't endorsed the concept of a flat tax or VAT. Those are all things that economists argue would make tax collection more efficient in America. I think politically they're very challenging for a number of different reasons. It's all to say, I think that there are a number of options one could look at to figure out how we might enhance the revenue side of this. And again, Simpson-Bowles did some of this. They did some revenue enhancements that got us a long way towards solving the long-term deficit problems. But it all works together in our system. We have an individual tax code. We have a corporate tax code. We have taxes on benefits that are used to provide benefits like Medicare and Social Security. All that whole system works together. And it's very difficult to say, well, let's tinker with one, because you tinker with one and something else gets impacted. So I'd want to look at the system holistically rather than saying there's one tax I would pick. I would say let's look at the system as a whole and reform it, which is what we should have done 5 or 6 years ago, but really didn't.
Yeah. For what it's worth, you probably already know this, but America often tends to do what Australia did 20 years ago, and there was a GST passed about goods and services tax passed about 25 years ago, which made a lot of difference to the Australian economy. But I will leave that to one side.
Yeah.
How about tariffs? Trump's obviously a big fan of tariffs as economic policy. There are different kinds of tariffs. People just confuse them all together. There are the kind where he's using tariffs for leverage, like with Mexico and Canada. Yeah. And then there's the kind where, like the reciprocal program, Trump seems to see as a revenue raiser, a money spinner. Do you have a view of any of his tariffs, whether they are working, whether they work or whether they don't work? What's your view about tariffs in general, and in particular, the way Trump uses tariffs?
Well, first of all, I think, Chaz, the way you've laid it out is absolutely right. There are tariffs for different seasons, as it were. And people need to understand not all tariffs are created equal. And there may be some tariffs that have a rightful and important place. For example, you could argue the negotiation technique tariffs have been pretty effective for Trump so far, and he'll continue to use them. And I think there's that. Revenue raising tariffs, how much revenue actually gets raised, I think is a massive question, because the impact of tariffs on economic activity is a piece that has to be considered dynamically. If you think about the degree to which some of those tariffs reduce that cross-border activity, you're not raising nearly as much revenue probably as you would have expected. So I'm a little bit more skeptical on the revenue raising piece of it. On the reciprocal, we're just trying to defend our turf, and we're trying to exercise this really not as an organ of economic policy, but of national security policy. I could see a good use case and a bad use case for that. All right. The interesting use case, or the one that's potentially useful, is China. This is a problem that both your government and my government have struggled with, which is how do you deal with China's obviously unfair trade practices, their constant cheating and stealing of intellectual property. I mean, these are all things that need to be dealt with. So some of that is economically going to be about enacting a price that may end up boomeranging on our economy, but sends an important national security message. And in those situations, you could see the selective application of tariffs as not just a good thing, but a necessity in order to make a point. So when people say, what do you think about Trump's tariffs? It's a complicated, I'm glad we have a chance to actually talk about it, because it's not a 1-minute answer. It is actually more complex than, I hate all tariffs, because that, and by the way, there are some economists who truly hate all constraints. And I would just say, welcome to the real world we're in. You have to have some constraints at some point. And trade does have to be somewhat reciprocal, and policy has to promote the leveling of the playing field, which we just haven't had. I mean, the arguments about the WTO and what it was created to do, WTO may have worked well 25 years ago. It's dysfunctional for a number of reasons now. Some of that is because we've made it dysfunctional. But my basic point is tariffs can have their place. And what Trump has done is to mainstream a lot of that conversation. And we don't have to agree with all of it to say that the broad approach that he's exercising is one that I think is valuable and potentially impactful for the United States going forward.
Let's talk foreign policy briefly. We've got about 5 minutes left, so I might as well just mention it. Do you think there's an obvious way forward with Ukraine and Russia?
It's very hard. I mean, I think at some level it is stating the obvious to say that we're going to be very hard pressed to go back to the status quo before all of this happened. Whether it's our expectations about Ukraine's participation in NATO, or Ukraine's territorial expectations, or our sense of the relationship and balance of power between different countries in the region. I think a lot of that's been altered by the history of the last couple of years. I mean, I do tend to think that, for the benefit of humankind, ending this conflict is important. But the terms on which that's ended, and the degree to which, for example, the U.S. is involved in really brokering a solution that works for the Ukrainians and for the Russians, I would hope the U.S. would be a productive player in engaging both sides in that. The concern that I have is that the footsie that's happening with Putin right now is somewhat worrisome because of who Putin is and what he's proven an ability to do. And that is what I worry about, is that, we've known for decades that Vladimir Putin's a bad guy. And we've known for decades that he's someone who has imperial and territorial ambitions. And so to feel like we're ceding some, whether it's actual or moral ground to him, feels to me to be a little problematic and does not play well into the long-term national security interests of the United States. Look, I say this all the time. Would it be great if the U.S. and Russia got along? Of course it would. Would it be great if the U.S. and China got along? Sure. Do I think that's going to happen with the current leadership structures in either countries? No, I don't. And I don't think it's realistic to expect or want that even. But look, I tend to give the policymakers in there now a lot of grace, mainly A, because I know a number of them, and B, it's a hard thing to do, right? They are trying to balance how to bring an end to a conflict where both sides have a set of arguments that are compelling for their own reasons. But let's not forget Russia started this war. And let's not forget that there was an aggressor and that there was a target. And as the United States, if we're unwilling to state that clearly and plainly and stand for the side that has been a democratic partner, and it hasn't been perfect, Ukraine hasn't been perfect, but I do think that in this particular conflict, one should be sympathetic toward their position. I do worry a little bit about the longer run standing of the U.S. and our ability to speak clearly when these kinds of conflicts arise again, which inevitably they will.
Is it concerning to you how much the president seems to emotionally favor not just Putin, but America's adversaries, and how unimpressed he seems with America's actual allies? Is that a strategy, do you think? What do you think's going on there?
So I think there's a little more nuance here. So I would say with China, there is a genuine sense amongst people close to the president that there is a belief he can get to some kind of an arrangement or agreement with China that no one else could. Now, whether that's realistic or not, who knows, right? But obviously, I think some of the desire to treat Xi in a more cautious way is due to this desire to strike a deal with him. I could see advantages to that, but obviously some real issues have to be dealt with. Russia, we've talked about. On Europe, in terms of how he treats our traditional allies, I think there is a real sense amongst many Republicans that I talk to and many people in Washington who are not just MAGA Trump folks, that Europe, there has to be a fundamental change in the relationship between the U.S. and Europe and expectations of what Europe does and doesn't do. And I think part of Trump's method here is to shock the system and to say, listen, there has to be a relatively fundamental change here. So that's an area where, look, I tend to be a little bit more sympathetic to what the administration may be trying to do, because I think, frankly, the Europeans have gotten relatively a free ride for some period of time. The key relationships to watch in my mind are Australia and Japan. And to a certain degree, New Zealand as well. We have a important strategic relationship with, and Korea, I should have mentioned Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, those four countries. I really think that those relationships, it is important to keep those relationships as strong as possible, in part because of what we're seeing with China. And that's where I think we don't have enough evidence yet to assess one way or another what the president's approach has been. I mean, I think it's been generally friendly. I think he's tried to engage the government in Australia. He's tried to engage Prime Minister Shiba in Japan. The Koreans are coming over for economic talks next week. There's a lot of things that are happening that, to me, are positive momentum to ensure those relationships remain strong. But if we start to see significant strain in any of those relationships, then I worry. Because those, to me, are tremendously important economic as well as diplomatic relationships for us to have.
Okay, I've got two more questions. One of them more on the personal side, one of them just general. You might not want to go into the personal area. Let's see. I'll just throw it out at you. I wonder what it's like for you, a more moderate, policy-focused California Republican, to be member of a party which is changing. And I think most neutral observers would suggest it's changing away from you. Like if like 10 years ago, like the Romney Republican Party was just all about the Lanhee Chens, and the Trump Republican Party doesn't seem so much. I'm just wondering what it's like for you to be in that environment, and for you to, like, you're running for office. You ran for comptroller recently. I don't know if you want to run again or not. I don't know if you're just going to stick in think tank world. I don't know, but if you have any political ambitions at all, what is it like to be in this changing environment? Do you have to watch what you say all the time? Do you have to worry about tripping over some litmus test that you're not fully aware of? Do you try and stay offline? Like, what's it personally like for you in this environment?
I can only do and say what I believe in, first of all. So for me, at least, it's, I do try to be judicious, and I've always tried to be pretty judicious about what I say and how I say it, and I want people to hear what I mean. That's not always easy to do in politics, but I guess what I would say is, there's two ways to react to a party changing. One is to change with it in some ways and figure out how you maintain your influence and relevance in a changing environment. The other is to lament it and to sort of say, well, this is what I am, and I don't really, necessarily want to deal with that change. And my own approach is, I think you have to understand why the party is changing. And you have to look at the predicate for why it's changing, which is that for too long, I think the Republican Party was not attuned to the right things. And not saying that we're completely attuned to the right things now, because we're not, but we're moving in a direction where for many years, the Republican Party talked about being the party of opportunity, but really spoke to policy in my mind that was in many ways worked for some part of the population, but didn't work for the part of the population we're trying to help. So the idea that we're shifting our policy aperture, we're shifting the way we think about those things, I think that's a very healthy discussion to have. But it is not without some peril, right? I mean, I think we all understand that this environment is very quick. People are very quick to pass judgment. But from the perspective of what I try to do, I mean, I really try to call it like I see it. And the challenge for me, I guess, at some level is there's a fair number of what the president's doing, the things the president is doing that I agree with, that I think are the right policy, that I think are the right direction. Do you choose to focus on that, or do you focus on the areas where there might be some disagreements? And I think you could drive yourself crazy, I think, if you focus on the disagreements. I've never agreed 100% with any politician I've worked for, or any president I've served, or any president that I've lived under. I think the question is how you continue to fight for the things you really believe in, where you think there's progress to be made. And that's what I choose to focus on. But it's not easy. It's not an easy environment right now, anywhere.
Yeah. And then my general last question is, what are you expecting to occur I know crystal balling right now is difficult, but what are you expecting to occur over the next 4 years? Where do you see the country, the Republican Party, and Trump going from here on in?
Well, some of that's going to depend on what happens with the Democrats, quite frankly. I mean, I think they're right now a party in complete disarray. And it's not unusual for the party in the hinterlands to be in disarray, but the Democrats can't. I mean, sometimes it feels like they can't even tell right from left. I mean, they're so disorganized and so disoriented, they can't mount any kind of a reasonable opposition. So right now, Trump's doing whatever he wants, and the Republicans in Congress are doing whatever they want, pretty much, right? So some of the story of the next couple of years is going to depend on how organized the opposition gets. If the opposition continues to be fractured and unclear about what its goals are, then I think President Trump's going to be able to do a lot of things on his agenda. He's going to be able to make a very strong case. And then at some point, we're going to shift our attention to 2028, right? This is Donald Trump's last term. And so it is going to be about President J.D. Vance, who I think so far has acquitted himself very favorably in a lot of ways. So is it going to be his party to take over? Are there going to be others who are going to compete for that? To me, the single biggest thing I can predict is going to happen is that attention in Washington is going to shift very quickly. We're talking about President Trump and all the executive actions and flooding the zone. This time next year, we're going to be talking about something very different. And so whatever you think is the status quo now, just buckle up, because it's not going to be the case tomorrow. I tell people, hold each day very loosely, because the reality is that we're headed into a highly uncertain period of time where the politics will depend on a lot of things, but the next election is never very far away. So the midterm election in 2026 is going to dominate the conversation starting a year from now. And that's all we're going to be paying attention to, right? And this talk about the first 100 days is going to be a distant memory.
Yeah. Fair enough. Thank you so much for your time, Lanhee Chen. I really, really appreciate it.
Great to see you. Thank you.
That was Lanhee Chen. I hope you enjoyed that. I was going to do a Doge update after Lanhee Chen, but Jesus, I spent an hour 40 or something on immigration. I think that's enough. But we don't need these things to go forever. Let's just do some correspondence quickly.
Ooh.
Let's do a quick 25 minutes.
Well,
Yep.
let's play.
Thank you. Thank you for remembering.
It makes my job easier in the edit. Hey!
Okay. Let's start with JD Vance correspondence from one Lachlan J. Hudson.
I'm glad this made it through.
Hey, Pep. Long-time lucky, first-time caller.
Sounds like a great guy.
Regarding the idea there's nothing JD can do to curry favour from the far right, there is one thing he could do. Divorce his wife. You're right. You're right, Lucky. Lucky, why couldn't you just tell me this? Why, is our relationship that poor that you need to communicate to me through?
You'll note that I didn't have my microphone last week, or last PEP. But yeah, there is absolutely something. You and Dave and Melina were making the point that he is being strong-held and teased by the right part of, was it the far right?
Yeah, it's far right.
And if he divorced his wife, that is the thing that they would approve of.
They'd love that.
Yeah.
They would love that.
in the most brutal way possible, I think that they would love it even more.
Especially if after he left his wife, he then took up with some Fox News person.
Yeah.
Like Don Jr. did, and turn her into a Trump clone. Like Don Jr. did. You know, Kimberly Guilfoyle went from a normal-looking person to just like Lara Trump.
Yes.
With black hair. Also dark brown hair.
I only thought it was worth saying just because another thing that you guys said in the episode was that he is willing to do anything for progressing his political career.
Yeah,
and that is the test.
I think you're right. And I think that he's a pepper for sure. He's definitely a pepper. I mean, I've spent the last year talking about how bright he is. He's definitely a pepper.
And he's definitely had this idea before. If he's that bright.
Yeah, so he's listening to this right now going, yeah, I quite like that. Good idea. Honey. That's a great JD Vance impression I'm culturing there.
There was something else that that wonderful Pepper left in their correspondence. Are we going to get to that part of the comment?
No, I don't think we are. What
You'll note that the second half of my correspondence addressed something that was wrong with the audio. Sure.
I wasn't going to talk about that, but yeah, go for it. You explain the audio to us all.
I had the export from hell last week. I was ready. We were going to have a PEP come out early. We were looking at a 5 p.m. PEP.
We really were.
I start my export. Something got corrupted in my hard drive.
Yeah.
I did the audio first and didn't realize then after about 10 hours of trying to export the episode that the audio had gotten corrupted. So I'm not making excuses. I'm explaining what happened because at the end of the day,
there's reasons.
I didn't check the audio wasn't coming through one earphone, and that's apologies, Peppers, for that one. But also, there's nothing wrong with audio coming out of just one side. That joke will make sense in the edit when I've made it come out of just one side.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's a great joke you just put in post. Nice one, Lucky.
Okay, now for a correspondence without as much nepotism, please.
No. I was just going to say that while we did tweet about it and Blue Sky about it to tell people to refresh their feed because we put up a new version. It didn't get through to everyone, so I just kept on telling people all weekend to keep doing it.
Sorry.
But I just want you to know, Peppers, that we are going to solve this problem soon. We are weeks away from a website.
Yeah,
Almost tell them.
Yeah.
We're weeks away from a website, and when that website comes, the front page is going to have news. So whenever anything happens, for now, look at either Twitter or Blue Sky or a pinned comment on the YouTube video. I'll put it all three. When something happens and you think something's wrong, you can just go there. But then eventually when the website comes, just go to the front page of the website and you'll be able to see it there. Okay, so But thank you to everyone who
Thank you.
pointed out the problem
Yes.
because we need to know these things.
And you guys let us know immediately,
Yeah.
which meant the solution. I mean, at least the new episode got uploaded immediately.
Yeah.
Whether everyone got to listen to it. Anyway, apologies.
Yeah.
And
And thank
continue.
you.
And thank you.
Beetroot correspondence. Now, I went on a big tangent
Yes.
about in the last PEP about how I was just sick of big corn.
Beetroot's not doing it.
Yeah, I was sick of big corn trying to work their way into everything. Like I was saying, big corn, they're the sugar. They're the sugar for Coke in America. It comes from corn. It's high corn syrup, whatever it's called, fructose syrup, high fructose corn syrup. And also, it's in fuel, like biofuels as well. And they're like, I was like, hey, these bloody corn guys, like, can't they just settle for a delicious treat? Why do they have to be in everything? And then I just randomly picked
Another sugary produce.
another kind of vegetable and go, the beetroot guys, like they're not trying to get in your meat. They're not trying to get in everything. Now, I could have picked any vegetable. I could have picked anything they could have done. I could have said, the kumquat guys aren't trying to get in your shoes. Like I could have said anything. I just happened to say beetroot and I happened to say meat. Andrew says, it was a throwaway line about beet farmers not putting beet in meat, but beet extract is used in some fake meat products such as Beyond Meat. so the big beetroot are trying to get in your meat. But it doesn't end there.
Oh, no.
You wouldn't believe it. Kieran says, you mentioned you're annoyed that the corn lobby couldn't be happy with delicious corn and more like the beetroot industry. Well, in 2024, the US lobby representing sugar beets spent $16 million on lobbying. Lobbying from the corn industry appears to come from more diverse sources, but it's probably higher. In 2013, it was more than 20 million just for ethanol. Europe is a massive sugar exporter, Kieran says, and makes all its sugar from beets. And the industry is fraught with corruption, anti-competitive behaviour, political influence and so forth. The EU's been in trouble with the WTO for dumping sugar on global markets, hurting both foreign farmers and subsidising unhealthy consumption in developing markets. In fact, Australia brought the case against the EU at the WTO that forced them to reduce some of their domestic subsidies involving beets. Beets. Not so innocent after all, says Kieran. But it gets even better. Fat City says, guess what they use to make European Coke?
No.
Beets. So the random vegetable I picked not only is in the meat, the random use I picked, but also is in the Coke. The very thing that set me off on my tangent. So I could not have picked a worse example.
That is incredible,
How about
trifecta
that?
of unluckiness.
Incredible.
That's fantastic.
That is so good. Peppers, I love you. That was great. Sovereign Wealth Fund correspondence. Z says, Chaz, I don't want to advocate for voodoo economics, but the US's national debt interest rate's about 3.2%. Meanwhile, investing in an index fund like the Russell 1000 gives a 12 to 25% return annually. I get the feeling Zay knows what he's talking about. This is just an example of how, I know he's a he, by the way, I didn't just assume that. This is just an example of how investing all of the money earned for a few years could give far better results than just using the profits to pay off the debt. Remember I said with the Sovereign Wealth Fund, just pay off the debt? Plus, it has the advantage of giving a massive boost to American-based companies. There's a lot of complexities, but saving that money and investing it for a few years will pretty much always be better than paying off the debt directly. Zay, I know, knows what he's talking about, and I don't. So, hat off, Zay. Fair enough. Guido correspondence. Now, a lot of comments on my shirt in the last PEP, a Guido's Panel and Paint shirt. Yeah, Lockie knows where this is going.
No, I don't. I just saw the shirt.
I know. There's a different one I wore last time.
Okay.
A different Guido's Panel and Paint shirt.
Sure.
Alexander writes, now that we've broken the shackles of our national broadcaster and can actualise our late-stage capitalist dreams, can I make a merch request? I want Chaz's shirt, this app, Guido's Panel and Paint. I think you should just get some made and have it on the site as anti-merch. It'd be really funny and the cool kids would buy it. Thanks, as you were. As you can see, Alexander, there's more than one kind of Guido's Panel and Paint shirt. Guido is my uncle. He's my dead uncle, unfortunately. He's my favourite uncle. He died a few years back of leukemia, but he ran a panel and paint place, and he had the world's best T-shirts. The one I wore last week, honestly, we can't make anything like that because those shirts don't exist anymore. That shirt was given to me when I was 17 years old. Whoa. It's a 30-year-old shirt and it's still hanging together. You know how much I wear my polo shirts.
That's an impressive shirt.
It's a great shirt.
That's so much better than even the good version of merch that we released after the scratchy ones.
Such a good shirt. These ones I'm wearing now weren't quite as good, but I've had this one for 25 years, so it's lasted as well. It's a bit more tattered than the other one. But we should do the Guido thing as a tribute to Guido. He was a great man. By the way, if you're one of the cool kids who's into Guido's panel and paint merch, if you happen to be near Ingham, North Queensland, that's where they're based, right? Guido, that's where my Uncle Guido used to live, and that's where the panel and paint place is. His son is still there, David, and his widow, Maria, is still there, and they're both champs. If you go up to Guido's panel and paint in Ingham, if you're a pepper, you must have at least one pepper in Ingham.
Yeah.
I mean, there's like...
Or nearby.
There's like 3 people there. At least one of them must be a pepper. Anyway, it's like 14,000. So anyway, yeah, there's no such thing as nearby in North Queensland, Lucky. Nearby is like 3 hours away. But if you happen to be in Ingham and you head over to Guido's Panel and Paint and you say hi to David or Maria, say hi from Chaz, that'll freak them the hell out. I wonder what the hell is going on. That could be a lot of fun. And then ask them for a shirt. They do have shirts there still. I think it's these kinds of shirts though, not the really good ones, I'm afraid. We can't sell them because they don't make them anymore, especially not from the merch places. Sorry about that.
Well, we can't sell them anywhere at the moment.
That's true.
Yeah.
In a few weeks.
Yeah.
We might make counterfeit Guido shirts. We'll see. Stereo correspondence. Oh, yeah, we already dealt with that. Trump activity correspondence. Aussie Uncle Phil. The more I watch Trump too, the more I realise how little he's actually achieving. Even his deportations are less than Biden's. He's just doing it more inhumanely. I suspect the most he'll achieve is to wreck the US public service and trust in it, which is bad enough, but that will 99% affect those residents in the USA. Sorry, Elle. That's not me anymore and probably not any of my family for much longer, so that's okay. For they and I, at least. I think you're right. He hasn't done anything permanent at the moment, Phil, and things are going to get tougher for him from here. He'll probably get his tax cuts through, I guess. We'll see. But I imagine it's going to end up being much like the first term. That's how it's shaping up at the moment, which is the reason, by the way, that I said last week, I bet by the end of by 2028, he's going to be begging to not be president because I think it's going to get tough. I think it's going to get real tough. And even without pandemic, I think that he's not going to be having a great time of it by 2028. But we'll see. We'll see. Uncle Phil, I'm on your side. So we'll see if you and I are right about that. Gila monster correspondence. Fun fact from James, it's pronounced Gila monster, not Gila monster.
Oh, great.
The name comes from Spanish. Similarly, saguaro cactus is pronounced saguaro, even though it's spelled S-A-G-U-A-R-O. Okay, fine. Gila monster. Thank you, James. Trump lawsuits correspondence from Hugh. Chaz, read your segment of Trump's dodgy lawsuits. I was under the impression Trump increased the amount from $10 billion to $20 billion in the CBS case.
Reasonable.
I missed that. Reasonable people, they can differ about how much damage was done. Reasonable people can think there was twice as much damage done, Lucky.
Wow.
The good news, though, is that the latest reporting I've read about this in the last week suggests that Paramount aren't going to take this shit after all.
Okay.
Maybe they felt shamed by the previous reporting. Maybe they're peppers. Either way, still no settlement. And in the Hollywood Reporter this week, there's an article about them. They're reporting that Paramount are fighting back. To start with, they're fighting against the location. Because I didn't even get into that. Oh my God, I got so many dodgy things about this lawsuit. It's filed in the Amarillo Northern District of Texas. Why? What's special about Amarillo? Does Trump have anything to do with Amarillo? No, he doesn't. He's got nothing to do with Amarillo. Why? Maybe it's because in the Amarillo Northern District of Texas, there's only one judge, and that judge happens to be the biggest hack in America. His name's Matthew Kaczmarek, and he's notorious as this massive righty hack. And so everyone from the right tries to file their cases in Amarillo to get him as their judge.
Wow.
Because otherwise, in another district, they'll pick him out of a hat who the judge is. But in this one, the hat's
Only
a very
one
small
guy.
hat. It's like a Monopoly-sized hat.
Not Christian Holmes.
Trump filed in that district, and Paramount is saying bullshit. Why are you there? They're suggesting that Trump's judge shopping. I know. Who would have thought? Now, to be fair to Trump's team, they tried to make this less obvious. They revised their complaint to add Ronnie Jackson, who's Trump's buddy, his ex-doctor, the guy who prescribed all the drugs for his administration. And he's actually the House rep for Amarillo. What he's got to do with their stupid lawsuit, I have no idea, but they just made him part of the lawsuit so then they could say, oh, look, Amarillo connection. This is how Trump's lawyer put it. Representative Jackson is not only a citizen of Texas, but is a congressman for the 13th Congressional District, which embraces much of the Northern District of Texas and is situated entirely within this judicial district. President Trump's media holdings also derive a substantial amount of their profit from Texas. There's a clear affiliation between Texas and the underlying controversy, as defendants targeted their deceptive services towards the state and this district as among the leading media markets and population bases in America. Yeah. They clearly targeted their deceptive services towards Amarillo. No doubt. That's where the 60 Minutes report was directed at. Wow. Amarillo. Yeah. And also, CBS derives a substantial amount of their profit from Amarillo. Yeah. CBS responded to that by noting that the 60 Minutes segment didn't target Texans more than residents of other states. Also, a substantial part of the events or omissions giving rise to the claim did not occur in the Northern District of Texas. Also, the interview with Vice President Harris was filmed and edited entirely outside Texas. Also, Trump does not even allege that he watched the interview in Texas where he was supposedly deceived. And also, what does his complaint have to do with Ronnie Jackson at all, they asked. Paramount are also noting that if indeed this is a good or service, remember that we went through this, it has to be a good or service. If watching 60 Minutes is consuming a good or service, then it should be governed by their services agreement on CBS.com, which says, if you or we have any dispute with or claims against the other arising out of or relating in any way to the services of these terms, you and we each agree to resolve such disputes through an individual binding arbitration or an individual action in small claims court. Not sure Trump's going to go so well with an arbitrator deciding what's reasonable and what's not reasonable, as opposed to his lawyers. Also, so that's why they have those terms, those ridiculous long fine print things on websites for shit like Trump's lawsuit. Also, Paramount says they're going to take Trump through discovery where they'll pursue information over whether Trump has purchased goods or services or not, and whether Ronnie Jackson agreed to arbitrate claims relating to CBS's services. And they're going to want to comb through Trump's financial records for that. Thank you very much. So that's a bit of a threat from Paramount as well.
That's fun. Wow.
So this is becoming
more
more
interesting.
interesting.
Is it the worst lawsuit or is it a lot more interesting?
It's more interesting, but still the worst lawsuit.
But not the worst of the worst.
No, it's not the otherwise it'd be held in Guantanamo Bay. By contrast, there is a new standard for shocking legal corruption. If that's not it, I've got another one for you. A story that came out this week. I'm just going to read you bits and pieces from it.
Please.
A lawyer at advertising, from the Washington Post, a lawyer at advertising conglomerate Interpublic Group fielded a phone call in December from a lawyer at X. The message was clear, according to several people with knowledge of the conversation. Get your clients to spend more on Elon Musk's social media platform or else. Interpublic's leaders interpreted the communications from X as reminders that the recently announced $13 billion deal to merge Interpublic with rival Omnicom Group could be torpedoed or at least slowed down by the Trump administration. These guys are going to stop merging. Wow. The push for agency agreements follows a flurry of brands returning to spending on X, including Amazon, Apple, and telecom company Verizon. We now see brands returning in quite significant numbers because the easiest route is to just spend a minimum viable amount on the platform, says Ubiquiti's Schroes. Not because they want to advertise there and run their ads adjacent to the content on X, but because they're afraid of legal and political ramifications of not doing so. There is a word for that. That word is extortion. Now, the Paramount thing was implied extortion. This is explicit extortion. Yeah. If that's true, that's really bad. But we'll talk a lot more about Elon Musk, I suspect, in the next PEP. So I'm just going to leave that there. But that's just a bit of update for Hugh asking about the Trump lawsuits. Minerals correspondence from Lostak. Chaz, the thought occurs with the mineral deal with Ukraine. What guarantees will be built into a deal that Ukraine couldn't renege on in the future? Signing over half Ukraine's mineral wealth doesn't get it out of the ground or out of Ukraine. This colonial-like deal wouldn't put US troops in Ukraine to enforce any deal. Normally, nationalizing assets tanks your investment risk for international investors. But if the agreement was under duress, the markets might be more accommodating. Look, I think you've answered your own question there, Lost Stack. The markets. Yeah, they might be more accommodating. Do you want to risk your country on that? Because otherwise you're going to go bankrupt. It's a risk. It's a big risk. I mean, maybe they would renege. I mean, Trump would. But, yeah, it's a risk. If you're Ukraine and you have no cards to play, to quote Trump, he likes to say that, and America can hurt you in a lot of ways. A lot of ways. Trump can hurt you in a lot of ways. Now, you might do the deal knowing that Trump's not around forever. And then the next Joe Biden, whoever that is, you can just go, come on, guys, let's renegotiate. And they will. That's true. You could do that. But still a risk, isn't it? Could be Trump's from now on. I'm sure you've seen that meme, the 2028 Don Trump Jr., 2032 Donald Trump Jr., 2036 Eric Trump.
2045 Barron.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, who knows? Catastrophic Pencil says, on the soldier numbers, because we're talking about the soldiers defending from Europe, defending Ukraine. This might be a slightly grisly point, but there's a reserve army of conscripts in the European diaspora throughout the world that can conceivably be called up in a war involving the EU. Italians in particular are a big diaspora because of their citizenship laws about acquiring through descent. You can imagine all the Americans or Aussies with Irish or British passports being called up should there be a serious conflict. Italy only got rid of national service in 2005, so you can imagine it coming back into the national consciousness quite quickly if they felt threatened. Get ready to go to war. Come on, Dante, Chaz, unleash Lucidello.
That'd be funny.
I could launch their nighttime operations. I'd be pretty good. So, I don't think Ukraine wants the Italian army to help them out, reserves or otherwise. Catastrophic, but that's cute. Thank you. Look, Doge correspondence will leave till then. Election correspondence. Let's finish off with election correspondence because it's got nothing to do with America. This is good. This involves you as well. Chris says, Chaz. So he's got not Dr. Dave. He's asking me, Chaz. Who's going to win the federal election this year? Now, I don't know why Chris
Trudeau
asked that. I don't know why Chris asked that. It's not with Trudeau. Trudeau's already resigned.
I said what I said.
I imagine Chris is asking me that with mischief because he knows I know nothing about Australian politics.
Sure.
Like if you ask Dr. Dave, you get a real answer. But from me, honestly, I could not name 20 Australian politicians. Literally, I could not.
Present.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. I mean, I could name 20 in the past.
Yeah, you could.
But right now, I don't think I could name 20. I honestly, I might even struggle with 10.
You're setting a high bar. I don't think many people could name 20.
But
PEP is good.
Dude,
sure.
I could
Yeah.
name 150 American politicians.
Again, these aren't, this is not the median number, Chance.
Yeah, no, I know. But anyway, I honestly know nothing.
Nothing, yeah, sorry.
And I know that's kind of what makes me predicting it fun, because I know nothing. There's no stakes. It's not like there's no pride here, because I'm picking it randomly, right? I am. You might as well ask Grant Denyer. like Chris, you're getting nothing from me of any substance. You should think about, because I'm going to ask you as well, because you know more about Australian politics than I do. But before I go to you, I'm going to answer it. I'm actually kind of torn, because for three really bad reasons. I've got three terrible reasons competing in my head. Number one, I made a prediction to Kirsten Drysdale back in 2013 that I'm feeling pretty good about this prediction so far. So far, it's paid off.
Okay.
And that was that social media has changed politics, I said. It's made us get sick of our leaders a lot faster.
Mm-hmm.
And it's made governments age much faster. And so for that reason, I said, until our culture changes again, no PM is going to sit 2 full terms again for decades, for ages, I said.
That's a bold prediction. I like it. Yeah.
That was in 2013. And so far,
right.
I've been proven correct.
Yeah. Good bet.
If Albanese wins, he sits 2 full terms, because Labor has made it much harder to dump their leaders, right? So
that's a bold assumption, but you'll be closer to being proven wrong. I wouldn't necessarily say you'll be proven wrong.
That's true. I mean, there is an escape clause there. Yeah, that Albanese gets re-elected, then Labor
escape clause named Tanya.
Yeah, and then Labor do their thing. Exactly.
It won't be Tanya.
And, but yes, like so. But I would just say that's one thing floating around my head. That prediction. And I like that prediction, so I want to stick by it. But then, so theoretically, you go, okay, Dutton may win because of that rule. But on the other hand, last I saw, Libs were ahead by 4 points on two-party preferred. Based on history, that's not enough, because elections often close up. Australian elections often close up in favour of the incumbent. I know that from the last 30 years or so.
Yeah.
And this is the worst reason, but this one's compelling to me. Cook's Law. I'm not sure if I've ever shared Cook's Law with PEP before. I'm talking, of course, about Richard Cook here. Richard Cook, the guest pepper, who is in fact on
our Media Watch episode.
Yes, he was briefly, but he's also going to be on in 2 weeks' time. Not this Thursday, or not this Friday, but the Friday after.
PEP 200.
PEP 200 is going to have Cook. Yeah, at least it's scheduled.
What's Cook's Law?
Cook's Law is he? I'm going to see if he still stands by Cook's Law. By the way, Cook's Law is the most boring option always wins in an Australian election. All the time.
That's a great law.
Now, that doesn't mean they have to
done,
be.
Richard.
It doesn't mean they have to be boring as a person. They could be interesting as a person, but if they're boring as an option to win, like what's going to happen? Is it going to be boring? Is it going to be just, God, I know exactly what's going to happen. That's not much. They will win the election.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, and Cook's Law does hold up. If you go through history, it does hold up. Cook's Law.
I'm not crapping on Richie's law, but Cook's Law, but doesn't it have to work in hindsight? Isn't hindsight the borer of all?
No, he makes predictions in advance about who's the most boring.
Okay,
so therefore he'll win.
Okay. You know what? I'm wrong entirely.
He is Australia's version of Alan Lichtman. He's never wrong.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. Okay.
And if you ask me, he's got a lot more rigor to his predictions than Alan Lichtman does. Anyway, so who's the most boring option in this election? Albanese has made himself as boring as he possibly can be. Whereas Dutton, while he is a boring human being who speaks in the monotone, he's a more radical option. So as an option, he's less boring.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Cook's
Wow,
Law
okay.
suggests Albanese. So look, I got no idea. But considering those 3 terrible reasons to tip the election, only using those terrible reasons, balancing them all up, I'm guessing Albo. That's not saying who I want to win. That's saying who I think will win according to what I've got. Because I have nothing else. I literally have no other information. None. I don't know what's in the news. Don't ask me what's happening in America, in Australian politics at all for the last 12 months. I can't tell you a thing.
Okay.
Not a thing. Literally not a thing. But I can tell you Cook's Law from 15 years ago. So there you go.
I like Cook's Law.
Yeah, okay, Lockie. So you know more about Australian politics than I do. So you tip who's going to win, and people can actually pay attention to you.
Okay. Well, do you want my genuine answer or my more fun answer? I'll give my more fun answer first.
Sure.
My more fun answer is, and this
More fun than
might,
Trudeau?
this might link to American politics just a little, but I have a great fondness, listener, for a certain Clive Palmer. I'm currently wearing a Clive Palmer hat that I stole from his 2022 election. And Clive Palmer this week, I thought he wasn't going to do anything this election. I thought he'd finally tapped out after spending $120 million last election.
Yeah.
He's joined a new party called, and you'll love this, the Trumpet of Patriots. That's his new party name.
The Trumpet
of Patriots.
Of Patriots.
And they're going to fight on common sense principles. He got up and he said that they will make Australia great again. It's got Trump in the name. It's very subtle. And I think that it's just Clive all the way. If the US is anything to go by, we want another Trump in Australia. No, Dutton's not Australia's Trump. Clive is Australia's Trump.
Are the hats red?
No, the hats are yellow. The hats are yellow.
The hats are going to be
he
yellow.
has got a MAGA hat, and it's "Make Albo Go Away," which could arguably be the funniest thing that Clive Palmer said, but he didn't write that, so it doesn't matter.
How can you have 2 MAGAs? He's got "Make Australia Great Again" and "Make
Albo Go Away.
You can't have 2 MAGAs.
You just sell the same hat and it stands for whatever you want it to stand for, which is a belief that Clive, stand for whatever you want to stand for, Palmer, applies to everything. So Clive's going to come in and absolutely landslide.
The Trumpet of Patriots.
Yeah. Because he's just pandering to the same. Clive Palmer does this thing in every election, or at least the ones that I've been conscious for, where he goes, okay, what's a vulnerable group that I can sort of prey on? And last time it was the COVID skeptics, and maybe there's some sort of correlation between them and MAGA supporters in Australia. But he's preying on MAGA types, in Aussie MAGA types.
I understand that he's trying to conjure up Trump. But he's still calling himself a trumpet.
Yeah.
Trumpet of Patriots.
And you'll note that the logo that I'm showing here, which is AI generated, by the way, isn't a picture of a trumpet. It's a picture of a lion blowing a vuvuzela.
Oh my God!
So Clive Palmer's come in and he's gonna stir things up.
So apart from the Trumpet of Patriots, who do you think's going to win?
Cook's Law all the way. Just on a numbers thing, I think Labor leads by 23 seats. They're going to lose a ton because they're unpopular, but it'll get tighter. They've just announced a couple of new policies that seem to appeal to people that the coalition immediately went, oh, but we'll do that as well. So I just think that they're not going to get all of the coalition isn't going to get enough seats. We're going to look at a Labor minority, and it's going to be a nice boring election. Also, in terms of polls, the most recent one is actually I've lost it. ALP has actually taken the lead back on preferred after the Reserve Bank cuts. So ALP is 51 and LNP is 49%.
I had no idea. See, I don't know any of these things.
It's going to be Albo. You could be proven wrong, except you won't till that knife comes back in. Oh, yeah. I want you to be right because that's a fantastic long-term bet to have made.
Yeah, like if Albo does win, I am personally going to try and undermine him the best I can to keep my streak going. I'm feeling pretty good about that streak.
It's a good streak.
Yeah.
My long-term bet, just for the Australian election, if I can go on a quick tangent again, is I think the real person that Palmer is trying to pander to is not Trump, but it's Elon Musk. I think he wants Elon Musk to do what Elon has done for the AfD in Germany to do here. I think he's trying to get Elon to appear at a couple of events.
Because he wants even more money behind him.
Well, not more money. I think he just wants to have that appeal and play that character.
Okay.
And when they do, I'll be there.
To steal their hat.
I'll be there, Clive. I've got a history with Clive.
To steal the trumpet hat.
Yeah.
That's probably enough for Australian politics.
Sorry, thank you everyone for letting me indulge in the one thing that I do know.
But but honestly, didn't Lockie sound informed then? He sounded a lot more informed than me. that was very impressive. By the way, I just a little aside, and that is more Australian politics, but they when I came up with that theory about the no Australian Prime Minister lasting 2 full terms.
Until culture changes, yeah.
Yeah, that was, as I said, 2013 when just after Abbott became Prime Minister.
Yeah.
And
dude, man, you would have felt good for that streak there.
Yeah, I wasn't too worried about Abbott. I didn't think he was, but the reason it came up was because we talked about Malcolm Turnbull. Because Kirsten was saying was doing that. Like a lot of people were doing it at the time. They're going, how is Abbott the Liberal leader when Turnbull's so much more popular? Why wouldn't they go to Turnbull? And I said, don't worry about it.
Doesn't matter.
I said, don't worry about Turnbull. Like he'll be Prime Minister. And he'll be Prime Minister for a very short time because everyone's going to be Prime Minister for a very short time because of this new rule I've come up with. and she had doubts. And then Turnbull became Prime Minister soon after. And exactly like I said.
Nice.
And then it's continued on.
Lichterdello's law.
Lichterdello's law. That's good. That's good. But not as good as Cook's law. That's enough. We've gone forever. This is meant to be an hour and a half, and then it's been 3.
I apologise for being a part of that with silly questions and tangents, but well done. Thank you.
That is after I spent nearly 2 hours talking about immigration. Thank you so much for hanging with us in this PEEP, this PEP Extra for 198. We are going to be back on Friday. We're recording it on Thursday with Dave. And I will see you then. Until then, thanks for hanging around and stay peppy.
We found our pep, now he's taking the second podcast of the week. We're fucking nerdy for our own podcast.
Great ending.
Strong.
Pearl Jam, make your heart out.